Okay, the Hangouts is on there. It's live. It's a hangout to pity our evolutionist friends. And I use that term loosely, friends, because we have a lot of discussion on Google Plus.
Yes, we do. But we love them still. I mean, I do. I don't know about you guys, but I love everybody on this planet. I know they all have different opinions, but I can't. Maybe I don't like them or what they have to say, but I cannot not love them. You know, I pity them. That's what the Hangout says. You know, we pity them. It's not pity's not a word that I would take as like harsh. It's like pity's like, why do you pity me? If somebody told me that they pity me, I would say, why? What is wrong with me? Why? What issue do you have with me believing something? Or, you know what I'm saying? And I pity them, and I would tell them, you know, I pity them because you're going against other people's beliefs, but you have no justification for your belief. See what I'm saying?
Yep.
Well, I would pity them because they're holding the evolution theory as a supposed replacement for God. Because they reject God, typically, I'm talking about all but theistic evolutionists, which are a different animal and do it for a different reason. Let's say the atheist or polytheist of the world, they reject the one true God because he's the judge of sin. And because of that, they have to find some kind of explanation for all these things that exist. And so they're holding to an idea which is discredited by science, and it's proven false, only because they reject God. And so that's worthy of pity in a way.
Yeah, that's the sole reason for believing in evolution, because they don't want to accept God.
Yeah, they don't like the creator, so they can't be created, so it came about by some other naturalistic means, which is utterly absurd.
Yeah, and we all have a sin nature, which some people don't like to admit that they have.
Right.
But the difference is that we tell the truth. Christians tell the truth, and everyone else is not telling the truth.
Yeah, and they'll mock you for saying, oh yeah, sure, you Christians have the truth, right? Well, somebody's got the truth, and somebody's wrong.
There's only one truth, right?
Right, there is such thing as truth. That's right.
What I can't understand is how people like Christian anarchists and all the theistic evolutionists say that God created an ape or a common ancestor that turned into man, that God didn't create man directly. I can't understand. Where does the millions of years fit into the Genesis? You know what I'm saying? And he tries to weasel his way out of it every time I talk about it, and I'm like, come on, man, you've got to tell me how did God not create us as we are today? That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, especially when there's no evolution that's observed.
Yeah.
That's why I pity them. I mean, I pity them because they're saying they're trying to add something to the Bible, basically. You're trying to add millions of years or something. And he's saying, well, no, God created a common ancestor that turned into man after so many days or whatever, or there's millions of years, or I don't know how he explains it. It's craziness. It's madness.
But it's funny to see who holds on to the truth of the Bible and who lets it go, you know, with the so-called science of the unbelievers, you know.
Funny or madness, you know. Yeah, it's saddening to me.
I'll be back in just a minute, guys.
Yeah, a lot of big people like R.C. Sproul and stuff, you know, in all these colleges, they think that they have to side with the intelligentsia or whatever it is, you know, and they end up making themselves look bad, which is a shame. It's a real shame.
I mean, you know, I can understand where some of these people are coming from. They want to be different than other Christians. You know what I'm saying? They don't want to be like other Christians. They want to go for evolution because it makes them look cool. It makes them acceptable to other people in different circles. Because they feel like that they would be alienated if they said that they didn't believe in evolution.
Yeah, it's kind of like fear.
That's the only reason I can think of for a Christian to say that I don't believe that I believe in evolution. That's or believe in theistic evolution. It doesn't. Other than that, it doesn't make sense to me. Unless they were indoctrinated, which Christians, if you call yourself a Christian and you're indoctrinated, that's that's a different story.
Yeah, it is indoctrination, the evolution. It's a belief based on an ideology rather than science.
I don't know anybody past their. I don't know anybody that's older, like past their 20s. You know what I'm saying? That believes that. It's usually the younger kids that don't understand anything yet. In their 20s or whatever, they're the ones that become the theistic evolutionists. I haven't seen any really older theistic evolutionists. I've heard of some like major popular ones, but they don't really have anything good to say.
Yeah.
I mean, fitting, like I keep saying, fitting millions of years into Genesis. How do you fit millions of years into Genesis?
Well, see, that's the thing. It's easy to backdate millions and billions of years, but you have no evidence of such a thing. I mean, there's no evidence of such a thing. It's just speculation because, nobody can say what happened more than 10,000 years ago.
I'm really wanting to listen and understand how the theistic evolutionists survived, and I've looked all over the internet, and I haven't really seen anything. I haven't seen anything that really compels me to say, okay, well, theistic evolutionists have a point, because they don't.
Right. The only thing that they would have had is the time-light issue, but the time-light issue is solved because it all expanded. An expanded fabrication, you can't use that as a measure of time.
Oh, so they're using science to disprove God's creation.
Right. And it's all a creation, like you said, and we know it's an expanded fabrication too, from science, from observing.
I'd rather believe in science than what the Bible says.
Right. And it's interesting to see who's going to stand with what the Bible says and who's going to fall away from what the Bible says.
And they would say, "Oh, you don't have the right interpretation." That's the next step.
And it's usually
my interpretation is superior to yours because my interpretation uses science and yours doesn't.
Right. It's usually the people with their nose up in the air, trying to think that they know science better or something like that.
Yeah, you know who I'm talking about. I said his name already.
Yeah, I mean, I'm talking about a lot of big names in Christianity.
But they
all fall for it unless they're biblically grounded in Scripture. They care more about teaching of the Bible than.
I just wish I had a good, solid argument. Why? Why theistic evolutionists even exist? It doesn't make any sense. I mean, usually it's because of the pressure of society.
Right. That's exactly what it is, the pressure. It's exactly what it is. It's afraid.
Conform to society. If you don't conform to society, then you're not a Christian for that.
It's being afraid of being laughed at is what it is. People don't want to be laughed at.
Yeah.
And they don't understand it themselves, so they just follow the crowd.
Yeah, you want to be cool with like an anon character for your avatar.
It shows that they didn't think it through themselves. They're just following somebody else that said so.
Yeah, there's a couple of guys on here that do that, by the way. They're the ones that they're kind of young guys and they think that they're so cool, like they're with the in crowd and we're not.
Yeah, there's on Google Plus there's several what do you call them, creation evolutionists or whatever they are.
The theistic evolutionists.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense. A theistic evolutionist is an oxymoron.
Right, when everything is caused by God in the first place.
How can God not do something? Oh, God caused evolution. I'm like, why would He need evolution? Now you're limiting God by saying
Right.
He needed evolution.
Right, they make such a big thing. William Lane Craig makes such a big thing about the cause. The cause, there has to be a cause, and it has to be
Right.
not a physical cause. It has to be God. Yeah, okay, but he can cause. If he causes a resurrection, he can cause a creation.
Right, right. Craig does a great job of showing the ontological argument is good, but then he blows it as a Christian apologist by believing that God used evolution to create man. It's just sad.
Well, I know. I think a lot of these guys have a lot of good stuff to say. Like, I'm sorry to say, but I've listened to a lot of major Christian apologists like Frank Turek and William Lane Craig and John Lennox and Ray Comfort and Ken Ham, and the list goes on. You know what I'm saying? But it's not that to me, and I understand how you feel, Neff, but it's not like they blew it or something. It's like everybody has their own way of speaking, and I can't I gotta I can forgive if they aren't fully 100% on their game all the time.
Well, think about it. They're in denial of God's word, though. They're not accepting God's word on the
Yeah,
matter,
that's the
and
big problem.
they're giving a lie to the world. Um, in adopting evolution, believing it's logical or possible when it's clearly refuted by Scripture. So they're doing really a terrible disjustice to
Well,
God's word.
I think, and you know what? I've actually heard a lot of popular apologists recently say, well, Frank Turek's always been against evolutionists, but a lot of popular apologetic masters, the top guys, they have actually changed their mind recently. I've heard John Lennox change his mind.
Yeah, yeah, I saw. I was going to say that too. Yeah,
What do you mean he changed his mind?
John Lennox is back. He's backtracking from millions and billions of years.
Yeah, he's saying that it's a mathematical impossibility that evolution could be true. For how many mathematical equations it would take to make a horse through evolution would be impossible, is what he said.
Oh,
Right.
well, he's right about that.
Right. And yeah, I mean, that's what I try to tell people. Give me the equation for.
I hate to say about William Lane Craig, I still have hope, for him, of course. I mean, I know he's a very popular apologetic guy, but if he wasn't popular, I mean, it wouldn't be that big of a deal. You know what I'm saying? It's like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's a lot of people, and he was the one that wanted to debate Richard Dawkins too. But then even Richard Dawkins says that the young Earth creationists are more
he
sound
doesn't
than
debate. He doesn't debate masters. That's basically what he said. He doesn't debate people who are masters at debating, and he's almost quoted as saying something very similar to that, because he's saying that William Lane Craig would destroy him, and he knows it. And I'm not saying that William Lane Craig is giving the right message or anything. If I'm not, what I'm saying. I'm just saying that he knows that he doesn't want to do it. By the way, Richard Dawkins is sick.
Right. Yeah, I heard. Yeah.
So that's probably one reason he's not doing it.
Well, right now, yeah. Now I heard. Yeah, he's had a stroke or something. I don't know how long ago it was.
I
But
totally understand what you guys are saying. I understand that what you're saying. I'm not going against you or anything. I just, I still have hope for people, and that's all I'm saying. You know what I'm saying?
yeah, I was holding out for Christopher Hitchens. Hoping that he would see the
Yeah.
light.
I was hoping George Carlin would change his way
Wasn't
of
his
thinking.
brother a Christian?
Yeah, hold on. George Carlin.
Yeah, I was hoping George Carlin would give up his hatred of God, but he didn't do it. It seems.
He was so close, though. He really was. I mean,
I don't think so.
he was so against the government that once you have that fear of the government, then you start less fearing the people and the men, and you start fearing something else. See, that's what I'm not me. I'm not saying everybody, but once you have that fear that you can't fear the government anymore, then that fear leads you to some other road that you may journey down. It may, you know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
Yeah, but if he argues so much against it, that means there's something, talking to him, something that's nudging him, one way or another,
I think he said he used to be a Catholic, and that probably was the problem.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah, that could have been part of it.
Yeah, in one of his stand-ups against the government, he was talking about how he was raised Catholic, and he said, "Nice folks, I have no problem with them." He actually said that on stage. So I've heard him talk about it. He said he talks to them all the time. He still gives charities. He's not a bad guy. You know what I'm saying? People just portray, because controversy sells, and he knew that. See, by using all the bad words that he used, he knew it sold. And if he could talk crap about anything and use curse words, he would do it to sell. And that's it. In Hollywood, that's it. It's not because they're a bad guy. It's just because they know what people want.
I disagree with that, but I agree that some of what you just said does go on. I think some of them are just foul-mouthed people, and that's just naturally who they
You're not
are.
going to believe this. Tupac, believe it or not, came to that same conclusion. There's many videotapings and voice tapings of him talking about how he said the industry is out there to kill you. Basically, that's what he was saying. Like he
Well,
knew.
Satan is the ruler of this world.
He said he stepped into a world of something he didn't ever know. He was a poor black man from a bad community, and he stepped into something that was like almost Illuminati-ish when he started talking on tape. He would say
Many
he
have
would say
found out.
that there's these big wigs out there, and they'll make you do some stuff. You know what I'm saying?
Well, Satan is the ruler of this world, and it's his way or no way for a lot of people. If you want to become famous and rich, uh, most industries, you have to sell out to him.
And that's the same industry that evolution and that they employ. It's the same thing. I mean, that's where I'm trying to bring it to. It's all an industry. It's just industry. These guys, some of these guys don't even know what they're doing. They have no clue that they're promoting something that tells kids that they have no soul and they came from a common ancestor of monkeys and apes and stuff like that.
Mm. Well, the whole evolution idea stems, as a modern supposed scientific theory, stems from secular humanists in the 1700s who were looking for an excuse to deny God's existence, and they picked up on the evolutionary ideas of the ancient Greeks, like Anaximander and Thales of Miletus and Democritus and Aristotle, and they extrapolated those ideas. Oh, hey, that's what it is. Nature made us. Some way or other, we'll figure out how. But it wasn't God. Look, we've got our excuse now. That's really what was going on in their heads. And what you'll find if you trace the history of evolution theory as a scientific idea, it culminated from various ideas, one that fed off another, it fed off another, until Darwin packaged the whole idea and claimed all living things were related to each other. And really what it stems from is the promoters of the early ideas of evolution in the 17 and 1800s that ultimately culminated in Darwin's book were all Freemasons. So the modern theory of evolution was promoted by Freemasons, who are people who are dedicated, an organization which is dedicated to the worship of Satan.
I live in the state of those people. They're all around me, everywhere I look. I'm a Freemason. I mean, you got, unfortunately, and I hate to say it, it's not a racial issue, but there are a lot of black men where I live that believe that they're Freemasons. A lot. When I say a lot, I mean they have entire Freemason churches dedicated to black people who are Freemasons. So,
Same here.
yeah.
There's a lot of white people in Freemasons, but where I live, there's an awful lot of black people in the Freemasons too. And I see their stickers and their little emblems all over their cars. They go drive around like they're proud as heck to be a Freemason, when all I can do as a Christian is look at their car and shake my head and pity them and think, Lord have mercy.
Did you see what I typed in the room that you were in earlier in the side chat?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was outside. I'll tell you the story real quick. I'll just do it real quick. And I seen these guys standing out there, and they're like, "Hey, what's up, bro?" And I'm like, "I'm good. I'm just fixing my headlight. You know, got a kid. You know, they know I got a kid. They're my neighbors, and they're cool with me. But they're all playing some Kanye West, like some rapper stuff. I heard it. They're playing it really loud. What I heard was, "We're the Egyptian slaves. We're the forgotten people. We should enslave the rest of the planet for what they've done to us." Just all this kind of like Black Hebrew Israelite, kind of like Freemason, kind of like it's just so weird hearing that kind of stuff. And then it said pyramids, you know, with the N word, and I was like, wow, they were talking like that. And then after the speech was done, every single black dude on the block went, woo! Like 25 of them. And I was like, wow, they all believe that? They all believe that pyramids and they're the Egyptians. And see, and I tried to, and one of them walked up to me and he was like, "Hey man, everything good, you know, with your headlight?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm trying to fix it." He's like, "Well, if you need any help, let me know." And he was like, "So, you know, I hope you don't mind we playing stuff over here and all this stuff." And I was like, "Nah, you good, man. I play loud stuff all the time, you know what I'm saying? I'm like that too." Then he was like, I told him, he said, "Well, we don't care about white boys around here, and all, you know, because I live in the ghetto area." And I'm like, you know, and all that stuff. And then they all walked up to me and basically like a bunch of, and they was like, "Yo, you're a trooper. You out here fixing your car at 10 o'clock at night." You know what I'm saying? So they was giving me props and everything. And I was like, you know what I'm saying? I had to finally just break it to them because I know too much to just not say nothing. You know what I'm saying? And I was like, you know, you guys, I hope you don't believe in all that crap. And they said, "No, man, we cool. You know, Christians are cool and everybody's cool and we're cool." And they were Israelites, basically. They think they are, anyway. And I got scared, you know what I'm saying? It was crazy, man. You should have seen it. I was there just defending myself against like a bunch of people, and they loved me though. They were like, "Man, you're good. You know, if you need anything, holler at us, and make sure you know your wife is good because they see me all the time." So yeah, I mean, it's crazy the people that you meet. I still have hope for them, but I did say something to them, and I did tell them that, you know, not all Egyptians are black, and I think they got the point when I said that. And they're like, you're right, homeboy, you're right," and that's what they said to me. Man, it was scary. I think about 3 hours ago that happened. My heart's still beating. You know. Excuse my interruption. Go ahead.
I think it's unfortunate that so many black people have bought into that Black Israelite.
We got a little bit of.
It was crazy though. Like, I mean, they was listening. They were listening to people saying like, we're the forgotten slaves, we're the forgotten people, we're the Egyptians. All white people should bow down to us. Kind of like, I mean, they're hardcore. You know what I'm saying? I was like, I think it was Kanye or somebody, like some rapper like that. I'm pretty sure it was Kanye West. I'm pretty sure. Because I can't mistake his voice. It sounded exactly like it.
Bob said it. I've been trying to find out. There's somebody saying that I can get on YouTube live stream or something, and I'm not on there. Or how to get on there? I don't know. Anybody know?
Did you click the start broadcast button?
Yeah,
No,
yeah,
it's live. I
it's
see
live.
it's live. I got the live
Um,
signal in
you
my.
have to make the video public. I don't know if you did that.
Um,
Well, I have the live thing in
can I
my.
do it now? I can't do it now.
I don't think you can. You could kill this hangout and start a new one. And when you start the hangout, there's a dialog box, and you can choose to share the video, to share the live stream
Actually,
publicly.
me and
Yeah,
JJ were talking about this earlier. JJ, you want me to start it? Because I got a better computer and connection.
I don't know. Can you make it go public after you start one? I think you can't.
I
I
still
might be
have
wrong.
the live signal in my corner. Let me refresh.
no. Yeah, this is live. It's just that it's not somehow it's not public or something.
It still says live to me.
Yeah, it's live. Maybe if I put enough invites out there.
It says live to me. I've refreshed. I came back in. It still says live. Maybe it's you, Neff.
No, I
Well,
couldn't. I'm just a participant. I couldn't have anything to do with it.
I was wondering if Benneberry has any opinions on about us.
He's a noob, but that's okay. I'm a noob.
No, about us pitying the evolutionists. He might have an opinion on that.
Maybe. He has only opinions, he says. Oh, he's actually complaining about what I said about him earlier.
I'm not complaining.
I told you that all you have is conjecture and opinions. So, I mean,
What's wrong with that?
well, so do I. I agree.
Yeah, good, we're on the same page.
Not exactly. Not totally, because we observe a lot of things that is evidence of a lot of things.
So it's not opinion. Is that what you're saying?
Right, it's not opinion, it's observations that leads to
You know,
understanding.
I have a beef with the word "we," but that's not
The
your.
royal we, yeah.
Who are you talking about? Who is this "we"? That's all I keep saying to people.
Yeah, we observe evidence of the global flood. We observe evidence that the genome can only be what it is. It can't be something else, what it's not, because it doesn't have any information. There's a lot of things you can observe, be sure about.
Yeah, like one of them is the fact that the DNA of every living creature in the world is information organized to conform to linguistics law, which has algorithmic processes. And algorithms, information, and linguistics are products of mind. Natural processes have no potential to create any of those. So how did DNA possess those things? How does the information package that defines every living thing on this earth? It's evidence that all of them are a product of a mind. You see, and that's astonishing evidence of intelligent design. And the evolution does not explain the existence of any living thing, but rather a mind does. Somebody is behind it. That's probably one of the most profound discoveries in the history of the world.
Do you mean descriptions of things when you say when you point to linguistics and semantics? Are you talking about how we describe things or the things themselves?
Well, I'm talking about what I mean by is they've discovered organization of sequences of information in the DNA that conforms to linguistics law when it comes to compression. Somebody's making a terrible racket. I don't know whose mic it is.
I might be laughing at Neo's thing, typing in the chat. No, I don't know what the right record is. Maybe I'll mute myself. Hold on a second.
Yeah, it's you, Jungle.
Absolute fact, it's you, Jungle. Scratchy.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with your mic, man.
Yeah, it's probably my mic.
So what was that bit you said, Neff, about, was it compression? Can you repeat that?
Yeah, you can look it up. Compression in the genetic information. You can find even secular papers, science papers that discuss the sequences of information are compressed. What this means is that uh, base pairs in the DNA sequences code for amino acids, right? They make codons, and the codons are in linear order. But you'll have different sequences of information that overlap each other. Like a particular codon can be part of more than one sequence of information at the same time. For example, there's one gene in one bacteria. I forgot what species it is, but it depending on how it's expressed, can produce 53,000 different proteins from one single sequence of information. So that's what I mean by information compression. Overlapping and nested information that shares the base pairs of different sequences running down the molecule, and that's
Okay, gotcha.
that's like information compression. In fact, if we consider that information compression, then DNA would be the most highly compressed information in the world, and vastly superior to man's best computer compression schemes. We can't write software that begins to compare to the DNA.
Okay. But I guess what I was asking was again, is that a description of what you're seeing, or is that actually what it is?
Well, that's what it actually is. The sequences. Well, I'll give you an example. Let's say you had a sentence. I'm just going to try to come up with one. Let's say you had a sentence that said, "I went to the store to buy hot dogs because I was hungry and wanted to make dinner for my aunt." Okay. Out of that one sentence, you could also form other sentences like, "I went to the store to buy hot dogs. I went to the store for my aunt. I went to the store because I was hungry." You see, you could probably make a dozen different sentences out of that one. And you could also, if you had a sentence that said, "I went to the store to buy," I went to the store yesterday because I was I went to the store yesterday. No, that's not a good. Let me give you an example. See if I can come up with one. The store on the corner of the block is blue. And period. And then another sentence. They sell gasoline at low prices. And so you could, from these two sentences, you could form one sentence by using information from both. Like, the store on the corner sells gasoline. So you have taken information from both sentences and made one sentence. And that would be overlapping information in the DNA. So that's what they also find in DNA. So overlapping sentences, information, nested information sequences found within other sequences of information, and some of these overlap and are nested within each other. So it's super compressed information, and we just can't even write software with that kind of technology. We don't even, they don't even know how.
I wanted to add something to that, was that I think we don't have the technology today to say pretty much anything absolutely. I mean, you can't make an absolute claim on how big the universe is, or how long DNA code is, or, I mean, we know approximately things, but to say an absolute number on things is kind of, you know, I mean, it's kind of a fruitless endeavor to say, well, we absolutely know right now that our technology is efficient enough to say that this is the number for everything that we know forever. Because the technology may change tomorrow to tell us something different than we used to know yesterday.
Well, that's exactly what happens with DNA. And,
Right.
you know, what they say is they have discovered 25,000 genes, 22 to 20, the Human Genome Project determined there were about 22 to 25,000 genes estimated to exist in human DNA. Now, if you were to take all the compressed information in there, we were able to discern every single sequence of information that is actually in the DNA because of this compression technology in it. I suspect they would discover that there are probably a million sequences of real information in DNA, not just 25,000. There are 25,000 where we have start and stop codons that say start reading here and stop there. But there are sequences of information that overlap those and ignore them and go on reading other information. See, we don't know how the cell is able to do it, but it comprises other information. I think that they would discover, if they were able to discover every potential expressible sequence of information in the DNA, it would have to probably be, it would have to be hundreds of thousands. It's got to be some outrageous number. All they're talking about when they say 25,000 is readable frames where you have a start and a stop, and they know that it begins reading here and ends there. That's all they are able to say. There's 25,000 that they can absolutely clearly say, okay, this is definitely a sequence of information. But using the compressed, if we understand that DNA is compressed and how it seems to be written, I suspect the real number of sequences of information in DNA is probably at least hundreds of thousands. And most of that information is not even used except during embryonic development. When an organism is developing, say a human being is developing in the genome, in the womb of a woman, there are thousands of genes are being turned on and off like orchestra instruments in a giant symphony, playing instruments at one time. You got the violins playing now, and then they stop, and some of the violins keep going while others stop, and while those are still playing, you got tubas come on, and the French horns come in. You know, and they're just becoming like Christmas tree lights. Each one of them having its own switch, and they're just coming on and off in sequences and patterns, and it's mind-bendingly complex. I don't think they'll ever be able to scientifically read and make a map of what order in what sequences of what genetic information is being expressed and turned on and off. It's too complex and it happens too fast. And so that's what I mean by, in most of that information of the genome, say about 3% or so of it codes for proteins. The rest of it is of relatively little known function, but it's been observed that information is being read from the majority of the DNA. 87% is the last estimate that I saw of the genome is now known to be read by polymerase machinery for some reason or another. And so it's all information. And that junk DNA paradigm of the evolutionist is dead meat. It's a false idea. The 3% they're talking about is just the sequences that are known to code for proteins, specific proteins. That's all. The rest of it is also information. And it's likely that most of that is being used during embryonic development to turn molecules into the marvelous creation of a human being, so that 9 months later you get a human.
And that's the thing that really drives me the most, if I might interrupt it or just add to that, is that when people say that, oh, well, this isn't a baby, it's just a fetus, or it's just some kind of whatever they call it with the G word, or for a guyode or whatever.
Zygote.
Zygote, yeah. So whenever they say that kind of stuff to me, and I'm like, well, listen, this baby, this thing, this whatever you call it, has DNA that's different from anybody else's on the planet. It has fingerprints that's different from anybody else's that's on the planet. It has eyeballs that are different from everybody else's on the planet. It has a brain. It has cognitive abilities that
it can experience pain. Embryos can experience pain.
I know about the pain thing, but I'm saying that this makes this thing, whatever you call it, if you want to call it a zygote, it is different than any other human being that has ever lived on the planet to date. It has different abilities, different cognitive thoughts, different fingerprints, different eyeballs, different blood, different everything. I mean, different DNA. The DNA is what controls all of these things, by the way, that I just said. So this is how we do biometrics. I am in the field of biometrics. Unfortunately, biometrics wouldn't work if this was not possible, if this did not exist. So, I mean, this is the problem when I hear people saying that about the abortion thing, or just, I mean, or evolution. I'm like, well, I mean, how do you get all these different things from something that should create the same thing over time? It shouldn't create different fingerprints, different eyeballs, different. It should actually create something evolution-wise that is beneficial to everybody. Creating something different from person to person has nothing to do with evolution at all. At all. There's no way that everybody has different fingerprints or eyeballs and blood types and DNA, and I mean, the list goes on. This is how we identify people through computers. It's called biometrics. Look it up. I mean, you guys got to be kidding me when you say that, oh, everybody's the same when they're not. Evolution should produce people with fingerprints that have similar or the same grip patterns that help people grip onto stuff better, or eyeballs that see better no matter the color or the shape or whatever it is that we use through biometrics that identify people, and also DNA that it's the same throughout. I mean, come on. The arguments are so moot at point. At that point, I give up,
I would say that evolution is one of the most absurd things to believe in once you've seen the evidence that refutes it at this time in history. At this stage of man's accrued knowledge, what we've learned about things microbiological just completely makes evolution theory look absolutely silly. And I understand that people still believe it, but that's because they don't know about the arguments, the evidences.
Oh, and you know what? They still argue against biometrics.
But those who are dedicated to not believing in God, even after seeing the evidences for intelligent design, are still going to argue for evolution. But they don't do it because of science, not because there's evidence for it, for evolution, or that there isn't evidence for intelligent design, special creation. They do it for emotional reasons. Oh, no, there can't be that creator God who judges sin. No, molecules could do it. Yeah, molecules did it. I don't know how, but it sure did. See, that's what they go away with. And you can tell who's who by whether or not they've heard the evidences. Somebody who's heard a preponderance of evidences for intelligent design which refute evolution theory and still clings to evolution theory is not doing it because of the science. Because I guarantee you, if I spent 2 hours explaining the evidence just one-on-one with a person who agreed to sit and nothing but listen to me talk for 2 hours, I would provide them so much powerful evidence for creation that their mind would be completely trapped. There would be no way that person would absolutely intellectually believe evolution theory is lock, stock, and barrel true anymore. Impossible. So if they go away from that talk and still propose evolution is the truth, they're not doing it because of the science. They're doing it because it's something in their heart tells them it can't be true, and evolution's got to be true anyway, and they're going to walk away with that.
Or, I mean, it could be how it's being communicated also. I mean, it might make sense in your mind, but it might not be communicated well to others. Could that be a factor?
Well, I mean, if it's communicated well, I think it stands to reason that if I'm giving this evidence, I'm communicating it well. So if that evidence is given and it's explained in a way that anybody can commonly understand, and I think anybody who's good at creation apologetics could do that. I think you're going to find out where their heart is at the end of that talk. Now, it might be that they might not come right out and say, you know what, you've convinced me, or I'm having trouble believing in evolution now. I'm going to go away and start investigating this thing because now you got me questioning it. I'm not sure it's true anymore. But the thing is, and it could be that. And if somebody did that, it might simply be that their ego's a little bruised. You know, they might be thinking, gee, I don't want to just come right out and say I'm convinced, or, you know, I seriously doubt evolution now, because I'd be kind of like saying to him, you know what, I've been believing a lie all this time. Gee, I was a dope. And they might not want to admit that. And so they might go away saying, well, I'm not convinced, you know, I'll investigate. I'll get back with you. So, but I mean, I can understand that. People have egos, and nobody wants to nobody wants to admit they've believed a lie. You know, I wouldn't want to do it. Nobody else wants to do that. No, we all have pride, a certain level of pride, and I can understand that and I respect that.
And don't give.
But I mean, look at
Wait, don't
Oh, you
give
get
away
it.
my second point. Hold on. Don't give away my second point before I have to go for a minute. Is that I would have to give up my beliefs in Christianity to say that evolution is true. So there we go.
Just on the communication, I mean, it seems like a fairly heavy subject, laden with a lot of terms, scientific jargon, a lot of definitions that would need to be understood. Is it something that you can put into layman's term that would convince somebody, or do people have to go away and do X amount of study and understanding before they understand the concept?
I could put it in layman's terms for you really quick, and I thought I just did. I would have to give up my beliefs in Christianity to say that evolution is true. I mean, is that not layman's enough?
No, I think what he's saying is, instead of talking about DNA sequences and polymerase and machinery, this kind of stuff, can you put it in terms where anybody who doesn't know what those things are, and I'm no expert, but I just know what I know. Yeah, it can be if you explain, there are machines made of molecules that act like a machine, that run down the length of the DNA molecule, and they literally read it, by interacting with it. They copy off pieces of it. I think you can describe that in such a way that people say, okay, I get that, like a ticker tape. It's duplicating molecules on the fly according to what it's being reading. It's reproducing what's in the DNA using a different set of molecules. You can explain these things in layman terms. If not, then how does a college student learn about DNA, about RNA production and, synthesis? In creating proteins, we can learn those things. Anybody can learn those things. It's just if you can simplify the terms you're using and make anybody understand it. I think that can be done for anybody.
Well, I mean, I'm definitely up for hearing those sorts of evidences where it's at a level that I can understand. If it can be expressed simply, I think that's the best form of communication.
Real simply, I walk outside and I see creation. Atheists walk outside, they don't.
Yeah, but if you listen to that, I mean, what does that tell me? That's not really helping me much.
I walk outside, I look at a tree, and I try to count every leaf or every grain of sand on the universe, and I see creation. Atheists think that it's just a bunch of random stuff put together. So, I mean, you want it more complicated, or you want it more simpler?
Well, an atheist is still counting every leaf and acknowledging every grain of sand. I don't see how an awe with the size or the grandeur or the complexity of life around us necessarily necessitates thinking there's a creator behind it.
No, it doesn't at all. See, that's what I'm saying. We speak two different languages, so therefore
right.
What you see is different than what I see. So that's what he was asking for, a simple explanation to see what creationists see and what people that are not creationists see. You know what I'm saying? That's what I was saying.
I mean, I was curious about you linked that to your belief in Christianity, and I'm curious about what you think that link is, because I think there are a lot of people who would.
Well, I mean, even let me say Buddhist monks, Shaolin monks, even.
Mm-hmm.
They also believe the same thing that I just said. That they walk outside and they see creation, they would not kill a fly. You know what I'm saying? So, or a cow. A cow. If you kill a cow in certain countries, that's a crime. So, you got to imagine religious people are all around you. Atheism is a very small margin.
Right, but I mean, an atheist can just as easily be a pacifist or an animal rights activist. I myself am in fact, a little pretty sympathetic towards animals around me.
Well, I wouldn't call you an atheist then. That's just my opinion.
Well, it's interesting because people have sort of described it as maybe like an element of pantheism where you feel a connection, but I think that.
See, the problem is that you believe in something.
Okay, well, but I believe in evolution. I think that I'm connected to all these animals.
You right there. You said I believe in evolution. Did you listen to that? Now?
Yeah, I mean, I believe in propositions that have evidentiary value, and I think that we can determine what it is, and I think that we have a difference in what we think is valuable as terms of evidence. But
evolution isn't a belief; it's a fact. So therefore, you're not an atheist because
only atheists. I observe facts. I believe in propositions.
Well, let me ask you this. Why would you believe that molecules interacting with each other are capable of producing information and algorithms?
Because I observe it in the computer we're looking at right now.
Wait, where does it come from?
interacting with each
Yeah,
other
but
are
where do
creating.
computers come
Where-
from?
where-
Intelligence. Sorry.
where-
But they don't
where is-
require. But they don't require intelligence
Wait,
to.
algorithms and information
their
computers are written by human minds, right?
So.
Intelligence.
Right.
Okay, so there's an intelligence behind the algorithms and
Yeah,
information.
by the way, that's what I do
Decided.
for a job. Anyway.
Right, but there's no intelligence behind the algorithms that run a cow's brain or run.
Why is that?
I'm saying that
Or
that's
run
your
a cow,
opinion.
or run the algorithm that runs a piece of corn as it grows,
That's
right?
your
I mean,
opinion.
I
That's
think
your
that
opinion. That's
we
your
don't
opinion.
see. Well, I know, but I think that's really the key issue here is I don't see a reason to think that there's an intelligence interacting with the natural
But
as
everything,
compared to what
everything
we
that man
see
creates has
with the
intelligence
unnatural.
behind it. Everything that man creates has intelligence behind it, but nothing else does? Wow.
What,
Well, everything
Well,
man
wait a minute.
creates
If you
has
say-
intelligence behind it. That's true.
you say there's no mind behind the algorithms in organic things, but why would you believe that? If you acknowledge
Because
that algorithms,
I mean,
and
your body
computers-
grows.
Hold on, let me finish
without
asking
your
my
knowledge,
question.
though, right?
Let me
Right.
finish asking my question. If you acknowledge that algorithms and computers are created by human minds, but you're saying that the algorithms in organic things were not created by a mind. And so my question then is, what reason do you have to believe that an algorithm can come into being without a mind?
It's a good
Do
question.
you know what
I mean,
an algorithm is?
algorithms are descriptions of the world around us, right? So I mean, I
No,
think that
no.
in the case of algorithms coming together, I mean, all we're talking about is a pattern of repetition.
No. An algorithm is a mathematical equation designed to find a common denominator using the fewest choices possible. It requires
Right, but where's
if and
that
when
happen?
statements.
So that begs the question
Where does that
then,
happen?
does it not?
Yeah.
It begs the question because you're saying there's a thing that's designed that leads to the conclusion of something designing it.
No, it's demonstrating that there's a mind involved because there are choices in algorithms. They're not just algorithms are not simply what are. Algorithms are something that somebody thought of and produced. Okay.
Okay, well, then I would disagree that algorithms are being developed in biological life, right? I mean, I don't think that you can
Okay.
say that that's an evidence of design if it doesn't exist in biological life. The choice
but
being
but
The
they
problem is
do
you have to
though.
give an origin, though. You have to give
Yeah,
an
but that's not an argument saying they do. I mean, I guess what we're saying is, how did you come up with the first position? How did you posit that there's
Where did
algorithms?
the first intelligence come
As you-
from?
as-
Did it come from itself? Did intelligence come from itself, is what you're saying?
I guess I'm asking Neff, why did he posit algorithms, knowing that the definition of what he's
Okay,
using
let me
is
say
already
algorithm,
pointing to a
because
design?
I deal with algorithms. I'm the computer expert here. And
Okay.
Neff, too. Neff is the expert also. I just want to say, algorithms don't create themselves. Sorry.
So maybe what you're describing by using the word algorithm, maybe it's not the correct word.
You're thinking algorithms, they could create themselves. Algorithms, all of a sudden, just two cells or two atoms decide to collide together and create an algorithm? Where's the origin, is what I'm asking. The origin for an algorithm. Who created the first, or what created the first algorithm?
How did you come to the conclusion that to posit an algorithm to begin with?
Well, I mean, that's where we're
You're
going.
describing something as an algorithm. How did you come
All
to
this
that
other
conclusion?
stuff, I'm asking you a question you didn't answer. You answered me with a question. I asked you a question. You can't answer me with a question.
Well, I'm still I have the same question, but
I'll respond to it. It's this. When they study genetic operations, when they see what's going on with the DNA in the cell, they discover that the machinery that reads information off the DNA is doing things according to algorithmic process. In other words, they observe that what it's doing can be likened to an algorithm. It has the same properties as algorithms. So why is it not an algorithm? It's just begging the question to say, well, it might perform the same functions as algorithm, doesn't mean it actually is.
And
I've
that's
heard
what
this
I was
kind of
saying.
argument from evolutionists many times. It's like saying, well, that looks an awful lot like a car because it's got a steering wheel, speedometer, seats, and
Yeah, and
wheels, and a
that's what I was
differential and everything. Hold on, Neil, please. And it might have electric windows and a motor and a distributor and a radiator and all that stuff. It looks like a car, but not really a car. Just
All right,
looks
I
like
just
one.
got one sentence. Algorithms come from intelligence. Algorithms come from intelligence. There is no explanation for an algorithm without intelligence. I'm sorry.
An algorithm possesses if and when statements, and that requires mind. Say an algorithm might say, if A is greater than B, then go to C and compare C to A. If A is bigger than C, go to D. If A is bigger than if C is bigger than A, then go to E. See, that's an algorithm. If and when kind of statements. If requires a mind. Molecules don't say, hey, I wonder if. Molecules just do what they do. They just have physical properties. They bond or won't bond because of the electro number of electrons in their orbits are going to bond to each other or they won't. So all electromagnetism. That's all. Molecules could be likened to Lego blocks that can snap together because they fit or they don't. That's all.
That's what I was saying
They
earlier.
don't think about what they're doing.
What I
They
was
just
saying
do.
I was saying that earlier. I was saying that do two atoms decide or quarks decide to collide together and all of a sudden create an algorithm? Or where does it come from?
So that's the thing. If statements, the idea, there is a thing that needs to be accomplished, and I need to compare information to find out what I need to do to satisfy my premise. That's requires mind, and they observe processes, chemical processes in the cell, relating to the DNA that are doing that very thing. And they'll describe them with algorithms. And it's been discovered that some of these algorithms are extremely complex and absolutely ingenious. When they code them out and say, let's write this computer software, let's write what we're seeing happening in the DNA with the DNA as an algorithm and see what we get. And when they do, the programmers are like, whoa, that's freaking beautiful. I had to get a master's degree in mathematics to learn how to write algorithms like this, and there it is right there in the cell. And that's what they're saying.
There's an algorithm for telomeres. I told you about telomeres. The algorithm for telomeres don't match up for any other animal on the planet to us. There is no telomere that has the same sequence of telomeres that we do. I'm sorry, it doesn't exist.
The Christian organization Answers in Genesis. I listen to Christian radio quite often, and I was listening to a Christian radio broadcast while I was going down the highway a couple of weeks ago, and they were describing a situation in which Answers in Genesis had employed a computer programmer to write algorithms and code according to what was happening in the cell. They wanted to start from scratch.
I've seen that.
And they weren't wanting to just accept everything that was being said in the science journals. They wanted to start from scratch and see how it compared to what the computer coder was able to do. And they had an expert computer programmer attempt this. I think they said he had a master's degree in computer programming. And he started writing out, according to what's written in the science journals, about the chemical processes in the cell relating to DNA, and writing them out as code and as algorithms. And he came up with nearly a book's worth of pages of computer programming, took it into the director of Answers in Genesis and set it on his desk and said, I can't do this. It's superior to me. This is computer programming at the highest level.
Let me stop you right there. I mean, didn't the computer programming at the highest level fail to reproduce the production of the cell?
He was able to reproduce a lot of it, but some of it went over his head.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Right. So I mean, aren't we talking about a process that is much better than all examples of mind
we're saying
programming?
The computers can't keep up with the code.
No, what he's saying is
right.
he was the
compression
of the information was so complex and overlapping and nested that he was not able to write software which included the kind of information that was in DNA. For example, if you write software, you're going to sit down and write a software application. You say, go to line, create box. In Microsoft Windows application, you say create box dimensions, 600 pixels wide, 400 pixels high, create button, 300 pixels left. You know what I'm saying? Okay, software that writes Windows, okay? And then it says, this button does this function, this one does this one, and this one will do this if this check mark is here. If that check mark is not there, then this button is grayed out. This kind of thing. And so that's the kind of software. Now, DNA is a little bit different. It's not only written in ways kind of like that can be likened to that, but it's also, wait a minute, the code that says, I'm writing this code. The box is 600 pixels wide. The next line I'm writing is the box is 600 pixels high. And then, wait a minute, I just discovered there's a sequence of information down here a few minutes late that's using part of that sentence in line 1. Box is, and it's down here, and it relates to the same box. How did it get there? Because I can't write overlapping and nested computer software. I have to have periods and ends to I have to hit the return button and go down to line 202 from 201. But this stuff is using both lines at the same time. I don't know how to write software that way. I can't write software that way. See, that's what DNA is able to do. Remember I said overlapping and nested information. Since I went to the store to buy hot dogs because my grandma wanted dinner, and the convenience store was painted blue when I got there. I went to the store to buy hot dogs because the convenience store was painted blue. I can create a sentence out of two. Software programmers can't write software like that. You have to have an end to your line and start a new one. They don't know how to write software and say, if they did, they would have to write a software line that would be it would make the information, the program so fat, because you would have to say, all right, pick the third line, the third word in sentence 1, pick line 7, pick word 10, now pick in line 2, word 13, word 16, word 17, word 18, word 22. Then go to line 3 and pick these, and we're going to make that into a line of code. It would have been so much more efficient to simply write that line of code out as line 3 and be done with it. Because you would have to write numerous lines of code to explain how to extract a single sentence using multiple sentences. It would you'd have more jargon that describes how to do it than the information you're trying to create. See, but DNA doesn't end up with all that garbage. It just simply does it, and that's the mind-bending thing.
The perspective of it is that you would have to have so many hard drives. Those platter drives? The old ones, the platter drives? Do you know how many of those that you would need to store what DNA code has? I mean, it's insane. Do you know what SSD drives are? The new ones? The flash drive cards that you put in your computer? Basically, it's just a big flash drive that you put in there. Yeah, you would need, I think the number that I've heard recently was 552 of those, just to store just one part of the first part of the DNA code that ends up in the first telomere.
Now that's just if you read the code. If you employ all the compressed information, you'd end up with terabytes of data probably.
I mean, terabytes upon terabytes. You know what they call exabytes? Exabytes, and then you know what's beyond that? I mean, that's what they're talking about.
Get in there, John.
I really do appreciate the hugeness of DNA and how much information it's actually patching in there. But I'm still a little confused about how that amazing data storage system is shown to be made out of design when we have nothing comparable to.
Because it's greater than ours.
It's better. That's what I'm saying is that if it's better, then there are clearly differences in the way that in the way that it was designed. Let's say so where exactly are the parallels between its design and the design of the things that we're talking about, like algorithms and things like that, because
It-
it sounds like we're taking this incredibly like complex process that has multiple layers and really isn't fully understood by us or able to be reproduced by us, and we're implying that has the same as the thing that we know how to do.
Well, that's
You know
the
what I'm saying?
point.
So,
They discovered that it does. It possesses algorithmic processes. It possesses copy, paste, insert processes. A gene can be cut and moved and then inserted and pasted. Or a base pairs or a codon can be snipped here and copied or pasted in somewhere else. And so it has all the same kind of it does all the same kind of interesting things that we do. And more than that, it even has linguistics features. For example, um, linguistics feature of might be a comma or a period. That's in our sentences. We use punctuation. It has punctuation, for example. There might be, as the machine is reading the DNA code, it might encounter an epigenetic factor or a stop code or a pause code that says, okay, wait, like a wait statement in a batch file. It might say wait. And what it's waiting for is another molecular machine to come along and attach and then snip the DNA, cut it right there. And then once that's done, a molecular change takes place that allows the polymerase machine to continue. And so that's like a statement, okay, continue statement. So there's pause, continue. There's a stop. There's stop codes that say end information fine, stops. This is the end of it. It begins here. It ends there. A capital letter is start reading here. A period, stop. It's done. You've got all the information.
I got a stop code. Benaberry said whale and humans are very similar. I
wouldn't take him seriously.
think we got a problem here.
Yeah, we're talking to John. Let's talk to John. That's kind of like off of the wall stuff.
Oh, okay.
I
Sorry
agree.
about
That's
that. Yeah.
But yeah, I get it, because I really do appreciate that. That I mean, there are something that can be compared to linguistic elements in DNA coding. I think that's an interesting find for sure, and I think that we're talking about the same
Hold
thing.
on, Neil. Let's let him talk.
Because it's just the the process by which that came about seems to be, the process by which the codes that we see now that are all around us right now, how they came about seems to be through a process of variable reproduction and selection throughout the populations. So I'm curious where you guys see the end point of where evolution can no longer have that process anymore. Like, is there a point there in the DNA coding where we just can't get any more variable reproduction? That seems to be the process that we're describing here, the complex process that we're describing here.
Well, we do see limitations to animal reproduction in variation. There is limitations there, and if you push it too far, you get deformed creatures and weak creatures, and that's what they do when they create chihuahuas. You selectively breed the organism, selecting certain genes for smallness, and you end up with a toy poodle which is prone to disease and doesn't live long.
Well, I thought the disease was more about the inbreeding that resulted from trying to get pure breeded dogs, like using the old creation paradigm of the purer the breed, the better the dog.
That's part of it.
That, but it actually needs to be more variable than that, right?
That's part of it. The other part of it is that we know that really large dogs and really small dogs are prone to all kinds of diseases, heart problems, liver, kidney problems, and they don't live that long usually. A 160-pound, a 200-pound dog is likely to be unhealthy very much earlier in its age than a 70-pound dog. Yeah. And a 12-pound and a 5-pound dog is likely to have organ problems much earlier in life than a 50 or 75-pound dog. So we know that when you selectively breed for these extremes in size, either for very large or very small or extreme amounts of air, anything, you're pushing the genomes hard, and you end up with creatures that are not terribly fit for survival. Because
I
the
was-
original code, the original information, the original dog that God designed was perfectly fit for survival without any manipulation.
I was going to bring up that talking about breeds. If lions and tigers are a breed of a large cat that came before them, then the liger would be successful. But ligers and tigons and whichever, they only live for one generation. Their offspring, if they ever have any, will die very quickly, and they can't progress.
That's
And,
interesting.
and
Yeah.
yet the world's largest liger, which is probably, what was it, 10 feet long, maybe more, he will die, and he's far stronger, far more. He has a lot more better traits than any other lion or tiger out there, but he's docile, so he would starve to death in the wild because he wouldn't know what to do. So, but genetically, he's far more advanced than any of the lions or tigers out there. So there is that's an example of perfection actually can at sometimes, rarely, produce more problems in some unforeseen reasons. So it's one example.
To answer John's question, John, no, I think that lions and tigers are variations of the original cat that God made. And when you try to reverse engineer that, you just get problems.
Doesn't that go back to the flood of Noah, the boat of Noah, like everything spawned from whatever Noah brought on the boat? So therefore, lions and tigers are of the same species that Noah brought on the boat?
Exactly, and I mean, I think that's one of the reasons that I've sort of, in my search, in my stepping away from Christianity, I was in fact looking into evolution, and I mean, I think that when you think about it, like, I mean, if there is a main cat species and yet we can have a speciation event now, I mean, doesn't that suggest that we have this inability to actually get lions and tigers from that original species there, right?
No, absolutely not, because we have the ability. From two humans came the Aborigines, the Slavs, the Africans, the Arabs, the Germanic peoples, Native American peoples, Asian peoples. Humans are just a genetic variation of the original created kind, like dogs or anything else. And the further we get from the original created kind, the more we're going to see genetic problems. And I think the real reason for that is because the genomes are corrupt. And I know you won't like this answer, but this is what I really do believe. I believe that when sin entered the world, God not only withdrew His Holy Spirit from the earth, and everything, entropy for the entire universe and everything, when it began, there was no such thing as entropy prior to it. And organisms were perfect. There was no such thing as a genetic mutation, a random one, nothing. It did not exist. I believe that God tweaked the organisms of every created kind there was and began an aging process and enabled random mutations because He said, my creation will not live eternally in sin. It will die. If it's going to sin, it will not live eternally. I will not have an organism that is eternally sinning in my presence. So he fixed it so that we will die. And the aging process began, and random genetic mutation began for every living thing on the planet. Because the mutations have begun to occur, and probably God fixed some kind of a very critical genetic mutation in the genome of every original kind, a very specific, very critical one that will only grow over time. That's what I actually believe. I believe because of that, now the farther we get from the original genome, the less fit everything is going to become. Look at human beings today. Everybody who's 50 years old knows that there are other 50-year-olds that have died before they did.
Before we focus all the attention on Joe, I wanted to ask Neff a question. Do you think speciation happened before the flood?
Well, if it depends on what you call speciation. If you mean variations, yes, absolutely, of course, absolutely.
So maybe God put the best animals that were to walk into the ark. Like maybe He had chosen the the animals that were going to be most prosperous at the time. Maybe not evolution had already occurred, but speciation, or whatever you want to call it, adaptation, and that the animals that walked onto the ark were already built up through that process, whatever you know what I'm saying. And
Well, it's important also.
able to have different offspring of different kinds when they got onto the ark.
I think God would have selected organisms that would have been the most fit. But it's also, you have to consider, what is speciation? We don't observe any anatomical difference between any two creatures of the same kind. So what could be called speciation is variations in size, color, sometimes shape or patterns. This not anatomical features. For example, what I mean by that is every chimpanzee in the world is related to an original chimpanzee, bonobo or African or
You know what I meant, Neff? I meant
plains.
variation, speciation, variation, and what's the other word? There's three of them. Speciation, variation, and adaptation. Yeah.
Well, it's just that nothing new arises in the anatomy. Anatomy doesn't vary. Variations of the anatomy occur. Like an organism, look at human beings are a beautiful example of that. 6 billion, 7 billion human beings on the planet, and they're all identical anatomically. There's no anatomical difference between a Celt and an Aborigine. Just zero anatomical difference. Now, they're very much different looking. They're different in the muscularity of the buttocks or the calves, the height of the cheeks, the brow ridge, how extent the brow ridge is, color and texture of the hair, skin tone, how much melanoma in the skin. But you dissect them, you find, oh boy, these are exactly alike. They're 100% human. They have all exactly the same type of feature, the same design, in exactly the same location of this anatomy. They're a millimeter per millimeter. Exactly alike. Both of them are completely human. They all have exactly the same nerves going in the same places to the same organs of the same type. See? So there are no anatomical difference. Speciation, if it's a real event, doesn't produce anatomical difference. It only produces cosmetic variations in muscularity, maybe the shape of the skull. It can produce differences, but nothing anatomical. Yeah, evolution theory, however, requires anatomical change to be necessary and constant to have produced all these various creatures in the supposed tree of life. You don't get a praying mantis without anatomical change from some creature it did not have its features. You don't get the stinger in the tail of the scorpion where there was no stinger before without anatomical change. So it's anatomical change that evolution theory claims, but nothing like that is observed. No genetic evidence that genetic mutations and natural selection are capable of causing any anatomical change, even incrementally, in the slightest increment, in any living thing. If evolution were true, we should see anatomical things arising in the body plans of creatures everywhere in living things. It should be constant and continuously going on. We should find little anatomical weird things going on in the body plans of creatures that are not fully developed and not really very functional yet, but still coming into being. There's nothing like that in the body plan of any living thing on the planet.
I got a question. All right, so if the common ancestor had all the DNA inside of it to make all the apes and monkeys and everything and human beings that we see today, would not that common ancestor have the DNA inside of it to be better than everything it had evolved into? Since we are de-evolving instead of evolving. I mean, you know what I'm saying?
I do, yeah. I think that variation is a necessary, is an unfortunate product of the fall. God, if man continued to reproduce with no sin, and God had not tweaked our DNA so that aging and mutation would be possible, every human being would be born biologically perfect, and there might be variation, but there would be no such thing as mutations to corrupt them. And so man would be able to endlessly vary the expression of his genes and produce an endless variety of organisms, all of which would be perfectly healthy and suitable for survival.
That's not the answer I was looking for. I was looking for the evolutionary answer when they ask you as an evolutionist that question. Mm-hmm. Like when they say that if evolution is true, you know what I'm saying, with the evolutionary side, like wouldn't it, in evolution, I know what you're saying. I understand fully what you just said. But what I'm saying is, in evolution, would not that common ancestor have the DNA inside of it to be stronger and better than everything that it had evolved into? So let's say the
Yes,
common
it would
ancestor
be
had
necessary.
all of the DNA inside of it. The common ancestor had the DNA to create chimps and monkeys and apes and
I see what you
you know
mean.
what I'm saying? So
Well,
why
No,
was that
because
common? Yeah.
no, because evolutionists believe that by block duplication and ART2H hypothesis, that is entire genome duplication and chromosomal duplication, these kind of events built the genomes of different creatures. In the original cell, say, the first cell that lived on the planet from which all living things came, had a very small DNA, very
Basically, the
tiny.
question
And
was
so,
why wasn't Lucy more advanced than we were? You know what I'm saying? Like Lucy. You know
yeah,
what I'm saying?
well, I'm explaining. They believe that DNA got bigger and more complex by duplicating chunks of what already existed and adding it on. But then random genetic mutation somehow not only built them, but also modified what existed, so it turned it into new code for new features, right? But the problem with that is that mutations destroy information, make things weaker and less formidable, less healthy, less able to survive. And instead of building, it's the opposite. What the evolution theory claims is the very opposite of what science has demonstrated for 90 years of research in mutation. And so, if evolution were true, evolution would be building a constant input of new genetic information by mutating what already exists to build new information that codes for new things. But the truth is, mutation simply destroys. And so, what we see is evolution theory has no support in genetics, and the idea that life was perfect in the beginning is now degrading and endlessly towards extinction is supported by genetics.
So what you just said was basically DNA propagated is the word I was looking for. Propagation of DNA that collided together and just created our magnificent human beings that we are today through the propagation of DNA through different kinds of monkeys and apes that had the common ancestor DNA already inside of them to create humans and apes and everything. But they needed to propagate the DNA. It just, it runs into like
I mean,
Well, here's an article I'm going to paste a link to on my blog about this subject after I debated Dr. Dan Larhammer at the University of Uppsala. He was a biologist and geneticist. He believes in this 2R hypothesis, and this article on my website is about it. So if you'd like to learn something about this theory of the evolutionists, or how DNA got bigger and more complex over vast ages of time to produce the information that produced various creatures from this common ancestor thing, that article might be.
I just don't understand. I'm really having a hard time understanding what you guys are talking about here, because I mean,
so
on one hand, you're claiming that from a single.
Oh, hold on,
Can I just-
let him ask his question.
Can I just get my question in, please? Like, I've been listening. I've been trying to be very, very patient here. I mean, from a single ancestor, we can trace back all of the big cats, let's say. So there'll be differentiation between all of the. Yeah, I mean, so we've got from a single ancestor where we can say that, and in that, I mean, we are saying that there can be different anatomical structures that come out of the process of DNA being replicated and changed and variated over generations. So I'm curious why we say that from ape to human suddenly there just couldn't be this variation and new anatomical structures and variation that might be able to, plausibly could change into from an ape DNA to a human DNA in that reproducing population.
Right. The problem is we don't see the anatomical difference. That's the thing. That's what I've already explained. We don't see anatomical change at all.
I mean, for your theory to make sense, for there to be a creation event in which there is a basic, perfect archetype of the creature that we're talking about here, and then now to have the creatures we see now.
There is no anatomical difference between them.
there has to be anatomical differences.
But there
though.
isn't.
I mean, or else there isn't a reason to classify them as different species or different animals now. And
Right,
we do.
but
there
we
is a-
acknowledge that we do.
So like a nasal cavity moving wouldn't be an anatomical difference.
That's the problem.
Yeah,
There
see,
is
it's
no
cognitive
anatomical
difference. The cognitive difference is the word you're looking for. Cognitive.
There
No,
are
I'm not talking about. I'm not
morphological-
talking about cognitive differences, although those are part of the anatomical differences that ended up distinguishing between apes and humans and things like that.
It's not the difference now between cats. Let's use your example. What is the anatomical difference between a tiger and a lion? You know what it is? Zip.
Tigers have stripes.
There is
Lions
no-
have giant
That's,
manes.
that's not
Tigers,
anatomical.
tigers oftentimes have larger females than they do
That-
males,
that's
where
not
tigers
anatomical.
have an opposite effect.
That's
Those
not
aren't
anatomical.
anatomical changes.
No, that's
those
morphological.
are in fact anatomical. I mean, lions
No,
have
that's
big
not
tufts,
anatomical.
and tigers have a constant.
Well, it is.
Oh, okay, wait a second.
It is different because more weight equals larger condyles due to
No.
the weight, so you have more growing of calcium. That's an anatomical difference.
Consider what I'm saying. You say lions have a big mane and tigers don't, right? That's not anatomical. Both of them have the hair around the neck. All right, both of them have hair. One of them just has longer hair.
What's
Hair. And hold on. The hair is the anatomical feature, not the length of it. Length is not anatomical. Hair is.
let's
See?
get back to humans.
So no difference. Both of them have claws. Both of them have the same number of teeth in the same location in their jaw.
Yeah.
Both of them have a jaw. Both of them have nostrils. Both of them have.
About
You
animals,
see what I'm saying? There is no anatomical difference between a tiger and a lion.
It's about humans. It's not about animals. We're not
There's-
animals. Humans
there's only-
are animals.
There's only variation in those anatomical features. There is not any kind of feature in the body plan of a lion that doesn't exist in that of a tiger. They have the same anatomy. They only have variations in it. And the same is true with all the finches that Charles Darwin observed on the Galapagos. They all have the same features. They both have beaks. They have this. Both of them have. All of them have skulls. All of them have eyes. All of them have feathers. All of them have wings. All of them have the exact same number of bones in the exact same location of their skeleton. All of them have a pancreas. They've all got a stomach. They've all got intestines. Do you see what I mean? They have all the same anatomical features. The variations is things like the size of the beak. Size is not anatomical. That's only how big the anatomical feature is. So see, there is no anatomical features. We don't difference. We don't see anatomical change in living things.
I don't think that's entirely true. I mean, I know that there are various species of toucans that are definitely classified, including the size of the beak. So I mean, I think it might be, there might be some differentiations there. But I mean, my argument still kind of holds. I mean, you're right that lions and tigers are anatomically similar. But I think that homology points to both of our theories in this case. So I think that what we're really talking about here is the speciation. Why can't lions and tigers interbreed if they came from a common ancestor and have the same anatomical features?
They do, and it's called a ligers.
Yeah, but it's impotent, right? I mean, it's a hybrid.
Right.
It is,
so that's
it is,
limitation.
infertile.
That's a problem for evolution theory, not creation.
No, because evolution theory doesn't talk about, two separate interbreeding species coming together. It talks about the general change that happens within the population.
What's a species?
So what we're talking about is change within tiger populations as they are isolated. So the difference
you just said that you think that they're two different interbreeding species. We don't. That's the difference.
That's right. That's a good point, Neil.
If they have
saying
offspring, if they have the offspring,
the commonality of
it, something is compatible there. That's a great deal.
I have to point out something. There is
right, but their closeness on the tree of life could be it.
John, let me explain something. I want to be scientifically correct. I did make a statement that was sort of correct, but I also told a lie. I said there is no such thing as anatomical change ever observed. That's in general true, but there is only one exception to that we know of. It's called phenotypic plasticity, and it still supports that anatomy doesn't change. What phenotypic plasticity is we observe, let's say, the Italian wall lizard was a perfect example that left evolutionists with eggs on their face. Evolutionists loosed some lizards on an island in the Mediterranean. 36 years later, they studied them and found that they had what are called cecal valves in their stomach. And the ones on the mainland that these creatures came from did not. And so the evolutionists declared, look, evolution, they evolved cecal valves in the stomach, the little gastronomical bile valves that did not exist before. Then they studied the creatures further and realized this is nothing but phenotypic plasticity. In other words, the organism on the mainland of Italy already had the genetic information to produce cecal valves in its genome. A change in its diet caused the organism, because of intelligent design, to switch those genes off so that to switch them on so that the cecal valves would become expressed and the organism would then begin to recreate the cecal valves once again, because they took those lizards back to the mainland of Italy, put them in a lab, changed their diet back to what they would have been before they released them on the island, and the cecal valves disappeared. Okay, so what this proved was that the original lizards from which those came already had the genetic information to produce cecal valves in their genome. It was already coded there. So the fact that they were able to turn the genes on to make cecal valves and turn them back off again only points to the fact that the original lizard had the cecal valves in its genome and did have cecal valves. Turning off a feature and turning it back on is called phenotypic plasticity. That does constitute anatomical change, but it doesn't produce, it's not the kind of anatomical change that supports evolution, because evolution requires that mutations created the new genetic information that codes for the cecal valves, right? But this way, this example, so phenotypic plasticity is the example.
Isn't an example of population change or allele change over time, right? I mean, this isn't actually an example of evolution, and so it doesn't show anything positive about evolution because it's not meant to.
That's correct. But the evolutionists declared otherwise.
So it wasn't. Well, I mean, the fact that they stepped in it before all the facts were in doesn't necessarily mean that evolution isn't the case in breeding populations.
Yeah,
and there are in fact examples of breeding populations that have been secluded and isolated, and they end up having allele frequency changes, and these are in fact speciation events. So
I agree.
We can talk about the fact that DNA is amazing, and that many creatures that are alive today are a result of an incredibly complex process that's brought about some pretty incredible attributes. I think both of us are marveling at the amazing of the plasticity, as you were saying, of the DNA that we're talking about here.
Right.
But I think that when we're talking about breeding populations and the amount of time that we're talking about here, I don't think it's beyond the realm of plausibility that we could see these kind of changes over that amount of time.
Well, see, the problem with that, John, is that evolution posits that it's random mutations and changes to allele frequency that produce the features when they did not exist in the genome. It built the information that codes for the new features. Like in some precursor to the scorpion, there was a creature that had a tail, but it had no stinger in its tail, right? And so genetic mutations built the information that created a new anatomical feature, the stinger in the tail, right? That's what evolution posits, right? That new things arise in the anatomy. Not that the genome of the organism already had the information, because its original created kind, from which it came, had a stinger, and it was able to turn the stinger on or off at will as needed because of the changing environment. That doesn't support evolution, but evolution posits that the new features come into being by mechanisms in genetics, right? New features which did not exist in the genomes of any ancestor. That's what there is no evidence to support in genetics, and all the evidence against it in the world, because mutations don't build new genetic information.
I think you're right that the change is in the genetics, but I think that you're wrong that the genetics have to hold all of that information in the DNA in order for the change to be enacted. I mean, we see the very process of reproduction is a variable process in which genetic material is exchanged between two independent creatures, and those creatures usually have different DNAs, and yet their offspring doesn't contain the exact same DNA strand that they do.
But they have the same anatomy.
We see a process of continuous change through a population.
That's right.
That will and those populations are breeding, and it is a competitive breeding process in which the selections will be for the positive changes to those DNA strands.
I'm with you 100%. Everything you said is true.
So each population has to have a variation in its DNA in order to experience any sort of anatomical change. And I don't think that's a stretching. I think that's where you're mischaracterizing evolution as a process. It's not saying that each part of the anatomy must be present in that code. Because no, it couldn't be present in that code, or it would have been coded for in that creature that contained it, and that's why I'm characterizing it.
Right. No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying
having like you said, I mean, having the potential having the potential to code for it isn't the issue, because the genius of having the code set up as it is that it has millions and millions of possible combinations that can be coded for, and a lot of epigenetic issues that will change the way it's coded for. So I think
I agree with you.
We've got a process now that is completely variable.
I understand what you're saying, and everything you said is true, except where you start to extrapolate that this process is going to produce new anatomical features. See, if you have a manual for producing an automobile, you can build that automobile from the manual of which components go what location and how they're bolted together and how many foot-pounds of torque to apply. Right? You can get that. Right? But but from those instructions on how to build an automobile, you can't get a space shuttle because the components are not even listed. See what I'm saying?
So what if there was a process by which you were combining manuals from multiple motor vehicles over and over in a process of competitive selection, and then after 10,000 generations of those selections, you were to see which ones would have been selected for? I bet you might get to a space shuttle.
Okay, so
Neo would like to say something, but I'll just jump in for 1 second.
Please.
That saying that you can use two manuals and two piles of components would be like
if
you
there
saying
was a process by which
would be like you saying a rabbit can mate with a fox, and because it's two different manuals and two different.
No, I'm
two
saying
different
that.
DNAs.
I'm saying that
So
each
anyway,
rabbit has different DNA, but I'm saying that if there's a process of reproduction by which two manuals come together, which is the process we're talking about here, two DNA strands come together, and they are combined into in a variated way, we would find that after a while there could be information.
I have one. It's called a CVT, by the way. It's called CVT. Subaru makes something called a CVT. It's just one gear. There are no gears anymore. It's just a chain drive. The gears slip onto and off of a cylindrical type gearbox. So the chains are what drives the engine, the transmission, and the engine, coincidentally, is that the engine is dependent on the transmission to tell it what RPM to run at. So when you step on the gas, there are no gears. You can go 0 to 60 in my Subaru Outback in one gear. In about, I think I got it down to 7 seconds now. That's pretty insane for a Subaru Outback, yeah. My car goes drops. Anyway, I was just saying. Yeah. So you gotta think. Yeah, they have transmissions now that do that. Now my question is, this is the big one here, and I'm gonna ask you, and I'm gonna shut up after this. We're not trying to compare animals to animals. We're trying to compare animals to humans. So, I mean, I think we lost focus when you guys were talking about, well, this animal does this and this animal does that. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about us. We're not talking about animals. We know what animals do. I agree with you when we say, through some word, like you say, evolution, I say variation, speciation, and adaptation through classical science. Those are classical biological terms, or adaptation, variation, and speciation. Unfortunately, the umbrella blanket term for all of those terms have taken over, and that word is that evolution. You know what I'm saying? Like Richard Dawkins says it. To me, it feels like it's a robbery of science to say that all of these things are evolution. There's no, you know what I'm saying? You have to go back to classical science terms. Like, I understand what you're saying. I get what, you know what I'm saying, when you say, oh, well, I know about variation, adaptation, speciation, all this stuff. I'm not saying you don't know. I know too, so don't give me the benefit of the doubt and say that, okay, so creationists can also have a good understanding of what these classical science terms mean. So when we're talking about these terms, we're actually not talking about what animal does this or what animal does that. When you say that chimpanzees and humans have similar telomeres, that's something I can't believe. I mean, I could go down the list of things that make sure that apes and common ancestors have nothing to do with human beings at all.
I have actual.
I mean people like us that have cognitive abilities that they don't. We share things with each other that they could never share with each other.
John, I'd like to
Poop at each other or rip each other's testicles off when they have a war. I mean, come on. We are not from them. It's obvious when I look at apes and chimpanzees, they're very smart, but I don't believe that I came from them. And if you go around telling black people that, they'll probably slit your throat if you're in Harlem. I'm
John,
just
I'd like
telling
to
you
point out
right
something.
now, bro, and that's my last final thought. I'm telling you.
John, I want to point out that when you said that when you believe that genetic mutations and build and natural selection builds the information that codes for the new features that explains the supposed anatomical changes that had to have taken place billions and billions times billions of them to produce the various creatures on the tree of life, if all living things are related, then you just left science and moved into philosophy. Now, to make that science, you need a mechanism for it. You need to be able to show with science there's reason to believe that. And I'm afraid to say that 90 years of experimentation with mutation, millions of studies in genetic mutation, have provided no evidence that there's any such thing as a mechanism for the development of new information that codes for anatomical features in any increment in any living thing. Nothing that supports that in science at all. In fact, everything that refutes it.
Yeah, no, I can appreciate your point of view there. I mean, I think that you know, it is pretty hard to really wrap your brain around sometimes. I think when I'm talking about, you know, I mean, you're right that it does take, you know, billions and billions of generations to envision that sort of change, that sort of anatomical change across that great a time. But I'm curious how you mean the word, like, I move into philosophy. Do you feel like I'm talking about a period of time that is sort of ethereal or theoretical in nature, or do you feel that I'm talking about a concept that doesn't really translate into reality?
Yeah, that one. You know, it's an interesting thought, but now to make it scientific, you need to be able to show that there's scientific reason to believe it. It's an idea, it's a concept, but it's not supported by science. So you can believe that one type of living thing arose because of another. Let me give you a beautiful example. They say fish evolved over generations and generations to develop their flippers. The lobe-finned fish's flippers changed anatomically into legs with digits of land-dwelling creatures. Their swim bladders evolved into lungs. And countless other things. You know, they got bicipital ribs instead of fish-like ribs and spines, right? Those are anatomical changes, right? So that's a neat idea, but now you got to support it with science. And there just isn't anything in science that provides reason to believe that that kind of change takes place. If for that to happen, you have to have a continuous input of new genetic information. Mutations have to create new chunks of DNA. and they have to modify those chunks of DNA so that over time they code for new things like new bones in the flipper that produce or the loss of bones. You'd have to have digits evolve from raytheons. You'd have to have the lungs develop all kinds of little features that don't exist in a swim bladder. You got to have, how do you turn swim bladder into lungs, for crying out loud, with bronchia and trachea and all these little things? A lung is a super complex thing right down to this microscopic scale. It's an amazing feature. How do you get that from a swim bladder? That requires a constant change of genetic information that codes for incremental change, and ultimately transforms a swim bladder into something astonishing like lungs. That's what evolution posits has taken place, not just for fish, but for every living thing, constantly happening, right? But there's no scientific reason to believe that. It's a philosophical idea. It's not a scientific one. There isn't any evidence in genetics or in observed speciation or breeding that provides any reason to believe that happens or it's even possible. You can believe it all you like, but tell me it's science with scientific evidence, not ideas.
Yeah, I think that's that's an excellent point. I think there are probably areas that we could be better at communicating those sort of things. But I think that when we're really talking about these population mechanics, I think we get bogged down in describing a single feature in a single individual and asking how that can change to something else. And I think the real question is, can there be small changes to that thing that won't hurt that individual in the population as far as their ability to reproduce and change that genetic material onward? And so when I see that we have fossilized remains of oceanic creatures that actually created cliffs, we have trillions of these creatures that once lived on planet Earth. When I see population mechanics in those sort of sizes, I can really tell that that we really are not discussing the same thing when we are talking about evolution. I'm talking about the change in population mechanics. So any small change in that genetic material that gets passed on in that breeding population is going to be added to the potential change of an ancestor.
I agree with all that.
Now. And
I agree with that, except for when you said the millions of years and that these anatomical features are going to arise by minute incremental change. That's an idea, but all you're doing is telling me an idea. You're not telling me anything that's scientific. That's the thing.
I see incremental change in every reproduced creature, and I think that's what I'm trying to get at, is that when I see this incremental change in every creature, and I extrapolate that number over the billions of independent creatures or independent species that have existed on planet Earth over this time, I can definitely see that there's enough time to variate the genetic material. And I agree that mutations are in fact negative, even in the most cases, but that would weed itself out of the population according to natural selection. Any negative mutation will actually decrease that individual's ability to reproduce, and so that mutation will be deleted from the population. And any positive one, even if it's only 1% of mutations that end up being positive, will pay off down the line. So it has a natural mechanism that will add material to the genetics as long as it is positive or at least not negative.
But John, what you've done is mixed real science with philosophy there. I agree that changes take place, organisms adapt, and there is variation. There can be incredible variation, but it's never anatomical. That's the thing. See, you can have 7 billion people on this planet, and every one of them has a nose, except for those who are mutants and were born without a nose, and that's unfortunate. But everybody has a nose, And the nose is, it's generally shaped like this, and it has two nostrils, and they have generally a flange on the outside, and they've also got certain nerves that run to the brain from the nose, the nasal nose nerves, and there's olfactory nerves. And there's certain cells, specific cells that are receptors for molecules, and they produce a biochemical change when they encounter certain molecules, and that produces the sense of smell, right? Right. So, but 6 billion, 7 billion people on the planet, every one of them has the same kind of nose. There is no anatomical change to the nose. They all have the same kind of receptor cells. They all have the same nerves. They all have the same skin folds in general. They all have two nostrils. They can be changed in size. The size of the nostrils can change. The general shape of the nose can change. There's no anatomical difference between the nose of an Aborigine and a Swede. There's no anatomical difference, not even at the minute scale. There is no anatomical difference. Variation in how it's expressed to make it shaped differently. It's what the color of it or skin tone of it, how broad it is, but no anatomical change. None. Not even at the microscopic scale. No anatomical change. That's the thing. We don't see anatomical change at all, with the exception of phenotypic plasticity, which does not support evolution because the organism already had the genome, the information to produce whatever feature it turns on or off, right? So that it's not like it evolved it. It already had the information. That doesn't support evolution. So phenotypic plasticity is the exception. There is no such thing as anatomical change. We don't see anatomical change at all. That's the thing. And variation's true. Human beings can have brown eyes, hazel eyes, green eyes, blue eyes, but we don't see anatomical change. Except for losing things, like blue eyes are a product of a mutation which actually removes a protein layer from the eye, and that gives it the color blue. But you've lost something, and a protective layer at that. Blue eyes are more susceptible to damage by ultraviolet radiation from the sun because they don't have this protein layer. So that can't support evolution. That's a loss. That makes the eyeballs less fit. Evolution claims creatures that survive or continue to be fit. Evolution can't be supported by losses. It has to be only supported by those things that evolutionists claim natural selection has selected to be a positive, right?
But
Not
I think
those things which are negative.
I think you're describing properties in a vacuum here. Blue eyes, yes, may have ultraviolet light radiation risks, but there can be other reasons why blue eyes might be selected for. And it seems sort of narrow to sort of say that, oh well, because one thing may have a negative effect on ultimate survivability. It won't have it doesn't mean it will have an effect on reproducibility.
But it's only a loss. Evolution claims
it doesn't matter though, right? If it's selected for,
it does matter.
It actually doesn't matter that it's not functionally better, because its function no longer becomes eyesight. Its function becomes reproduction. So,
but John,
so
evolution claims to explain the origin of features, not losing them. See, that's what you have to. Support.
Right. No, the origin of the feature is the random event in which we see the variation in reproduction. But what it's being selected for is when we see it stay within the population.
Well, you can't get an eyeball by losing things. You have to gain things.
But you can get an eyeball.
You keep saying the word we. Who's we? You keep saying we. Who's we?
Right. Well, he's using the we. He said we can't get an eyeball. I'm simply extending the metaphor. Now, if we're talking about we as in, evolution as a theory, then we can get an eyeball by gradations moving upward, as long as they are useful upward. And not negative in a net sense, not upward. Necessarily.
Right. You can't get an eyeball by losing. See, that's the thing.
But
to support evolution,
you can get an eyeball by losing, though.
No, because you don't. An eyeball comes into existence by gaining cornea, by gaining rods and cones, by gaining optic nerves. They did not exist before. You explain the eye by gaining things, not losing. So
we see light
to
sensitive
support
cells
evolution,
simpler
you have to show gaining. You can't point to losing things.
Yeah,
Right, I mean, we see light-sensitive cells in simpler organisms, though. So, I mean, we know
Okay.
of simpler types of eyeballs.
Right. So now it's your philosophical
Sorry.
idea.
hmm
It's your philosophical idea that because there are simpler eyes in some organisms than others,
Right.
complex eyes evolve. That's a neat idea. Now, show us a scientific reason to believe that happened. Not just an idea. A scientific
Yeah, I mean,
reason.
in a lot of senses, that is where we're talking about the hypothesis of evolution, and you know, in a sense that where we're not talking about something that is going to be observable by the short lives of humans, right?
Well, or
So I
even a
think that-
mechanism for it, right?
well, we see the
maybe
mechanism.
instead of
The
using
variation in reproduction
instead of using the words "we know," you should use the words "we think." You know what I'm saying?
Well,
Don't know.
that's the thing is people don't talk in those terms, right? We don't buttress every statement with we think or this is what I think because I'm saying what I think.
But John, you just
So-
pointed to the variation in population. You said that's how it happens.
In reproduction. Every
right,
every
but-
genetic every sexually reproduced creature seems to have variation in its reproduction.
Right,
We don't
John,
see identical genetics between parents and their offspring.
I agree, John. That's true.
Okay.
But see, what we don't observe is anatomical change. I've explained that to you.
But
That's the
we
thing.
observe variation in the anatomy.
Variation is not an anatomical change.
You can
That's
only
my point.
select from what's already there. You can't select from what's not there.
Sure.
See, John,
Okay, so
as I
within
pointed
that
out, the
population-
nose can change in size and color
We
and
can-
shape and whatnot. That doesn't add a feature to the nose that did not exist before.
Jungo, I get that we can only select from what's there, but that doesn't really tell us anything new about what can come about from the process of reproduction, right? I mean, when we're talking about the reproductive change, why?
Now you're talking about something coming about.
We have parents that
That's a
contribute
big
DNA
leak. That's a
equally.
big leak. Something coming about. You didn't explain something coming about.
We have parents that contribute DNA equally to you, right? Your parents contributed DNA equally to you. If we had a sister, if we, the royal we, Neo, I don't see why you're getting all excited about it. We is what you have to do right now.
Us. You're talking about you. You're not talking about we.
I'm only trying to paint a picture for you guys, all right? So let's take Jungle Jargon's parents and can say that they contribute 2 parts of the genetic material that we're talking about here. That reproduction is variated, and any of Jungle Jargon's sisters or brothers that weren't part of that original genetic material coming together are going to be very different than him, right? His sister and his brother aren't going to be the same height or have the same nose or the same. They can have variations in eye color or hair color or any
That's
sort of
not
things like that.
anatomical.
Right?
I
So,
have
yeah,
1,000 grandparents going back 10 generations.
But
I thought I
genetically,
went through this earlier before you got here. It's called.
genetically they're different,
It's
right?
called fingerprints, eyeballs, DNA. I mean, it goes on. This is what biometrics are made of.
1,000 grandparents.
Right, they're
going
totally
back
different
10
from each other,
generations.
and that's why I have the hard time getting to where we say, okay, they can be different than each other, and each generation is going to be different than each other, and each generation after that is still going to be even more different than the original grandparents. But somehow, if we go 1,000 generations in the future, the genetic differences aren't going to be different as they are now. That's where I'm losing you guys.
There's no
But-
such thing as
John-
1,000 generations.
John, all you're
There-
pointing out is what you've got to point out is this anatomical change to posit evolution. Variation, we all observe variation. It's the evolutionist that extrapolates that variation is capable of bringing into existence anatomical features that did not exist in the antecedent. That's the philosophical idea of the evolutionist. Now, for evolution to be believable, we need a scientific method by which this is known, a mechanism which is able to produce something new in the anatomy that does not exist, and then you need to be able to show that's true. You should have an observable example. There is no such thing. That's what you need to be able to prove. And otherwise, all you're doing is spouting philosophy, John, not science.
Well, I think there's a slight difference. I think it's dismissive to call it philosophy, first of all, and maybe a misunderstanding of the
it is.
term. I think philosophy is a much more nuanced term than simply giving you an hypothesis or an explanation for the facts we observe. But I think that in the long run, we're talking about change in the genetic material here. I mean, we're both admitting that DNA is responsible for the anatomy of the creatures we see here around us. And yet, when I say that the difference between their genetic material is going to drift as evolution suggests, I mean, you guys seem to push against that and say that there's some sort of limit. So I'm just curious where you feel like that limit's being reached. Where am I overstepping the boundaries of what
first,
could be?
I wanted to ask you just one question, and I'm not answering a question with a question because I'm just trying to understand where you're standing at first before anybody answers. Is that why is the scientific method of evolution or whatever important to you?
Well, I mean, for me, it was simply because you guys were having you were getting together to pity.
No.
That seemed interesting.
I'm not talking about to you. I'm not talking about for us.
Well, I mean, it was in fact it's a little personal for me because I was in fact a creationist for the first 17 years of my life. I was actually a firm believer in it, and I think that, you know, to hear first of all that you guys would suggest that, you know, in the years me coming out of my belief in creationism and beginning to learn about and come to accept the propositions of evolution, that I wasn't a true Christian, right? I feel like that necessarily is sort of, I feel a little bit of insulted towards that because I think you can be a true Christian and still accept some of the propositions anyways. I think you guys do in a lot of cases. So
I have the same position you do, actually. I used to be that way too. But what I want to say is, when I asked you why it was important, see, do you understand you just screwed up because when you answer a why question, you're doing philosophy.
No, not necessarily.
Yes, you are.
I mean, we answer why questions all the time in science.
You use the word "we" again.
Why is I mean, yeah, I mean, as scientists, as someone who is interested in the scientific method, we ask why questions. People who are interested in science ask why.
No, I asked you why is it important to you, and that became philosophy.
Well, says you're supposed to ask how, not why.
Well, I mean, you asked a personal question and I answered personally. I'm not sure what this has to do with anything. I don't think you've proved any point in this case. The fact of the matter is that evolution is supported by what we see and the predictions that it's made. And I mean, it's simply a process that we're observing now that we're extrapolating into the future. Now, I can understand that.
Yeah, honestly, I have been through the same thing you have. I honestly, and I swear to God, I've been through that with the whole, you know, do I believe in creation or not? Does evolution, you know what I'm saying? I've been through it. I swear, I'm not lying to you, man. It
I believe you.
tore me apart for a while. And finally,
Seriously.
when I walk outside, like I said, when I walk outside, I see creation. I mean, I don't see, like, just things creating themselves. That just doesn't work for me.
Right. Seriously, there's no evidence of evolution whatsoever.
Well, but evolution is that the things are creating themselves, right? Other than the reproduction that we would see in breeding populations. So
this is where recreate from what's already there.
You guys are asking for examples that I feel like don't exist, and I feel that, like, if it was in fact your guys' goal to get towards this idea of eliminating evolution from the possibilities, then you should be looking at what evolution would actually say, and evolution is talking about the breeding population we see. I don't
hold that.
breed.
I don't hold that belief. I believe that evolution still should be taught, but in a different way than it is taught today. I'm not saying like allow creation in the schools. I mean, a lot of other people would say that, but I mean, I think there should be some kind of alternative or some kind of way to explain evolution to where it isn't really something that is that so much necessary for biological studies or something like that. I mean,
shouldn't be forced on people.
Biologists without believing in evolution. I know plenty of non-evolution believing biologists, so I don't understand what the problem is.
True. I mean, in some ways I agree with you. I think there might be an emphasis towards one conclusion, but I will say that it makes it difficult to follow careers in science to not have an understanding of the theory of evolution. And I'm not sure if that's a structural thing.
You're saying we can't understand it.
Same thing. Well,
No,
Bill
no.
Nye said the same thing that you just
No, but
said.
it does. I mean, it hinders your ability to do biology, and I'm trying to kind of bracket that where I say I understand that I'm not sure if that's really the way that it's structured or if that's a result of the knowledge that you gain from the opposite side being taught. But I think that it can make it difficult to keep up, and I remember having trouble with it in university, not having an evolutionary background or really an understanding of the theory itself. And that's only my personal experience. I don't want to say that that's the general experience, but my science classes were made more difficult by me not having an explanation.
It's called indoctrination.
Right. But I mean, can you see how my point of view, how I see it now, as I was indoctrinated into creationism, and when I went to apply it in a facility of higher learning, it was difficult for me to do, and at that point, the indoctrination that I had received and assumed was the right information started to fail me, and I think that's where, I think that's where my real passion comes for it in this topic.
Which one was the indoctrination? You were indoctrinated in school. You were taught things.
Right.
Indoctrination is a teaching. You were taught certain things that aren't true.
But I mean that's really the issue, right? Is that what I was taught there, I assumed was true.
We see variation. We see adaptation. We see response to the environment. We don't see any evolution.
Right, and if I had never had to take any further education, I probably would have gone on with that understanding of how things had gone. But
John,
as I was going through the course, I mean, there were moments where that information would have been background information to my education, and I could have done better in that class and not have been trying to play catch up with it. And I think that's where we've sort of failed people when we teach them a creation-only education. And I think that I come from a different point of view in that sense.
John, the problem really boils down to that you believe that variation, whether genetic mutation or expression of existing genes, is capable of causing endless anatomical change. The problem is that's a philosophical idea.
I don't think I said endless. But I said that it does vary.
Okay, an outrageous amount.
A lot. It is an incredible amount of species.
But the problem is there just isn't a known mechanism for that in genetics, and there's no known examples observable in any living thing. So it doesn't mean. So that means to us right there, we can dismiss that idea as being scientific. It is absolutely philosophy. It is not scientific. Without being able to show a mechanism in genetics for that, and without being able to show an observable example, you cannot say it's scientific. It's only philosophy. This is what I've been trying to tell people all along. Evolution theory is not science. It's philosophy. It's an idea that this can take place without anybody ever having been able to show a mechanism for it. And nobody is able to show in any of the billion or so species on this planet any such thing occurring.
And they were all buried by the global flood anyway.
And then the problem gets even worse when we look at the fossil record, because the transitional forms just aren't there. So we don't have any record of it happening. So it's a philosophical idea. It's not a scientific one. And so it's not fair to say evolution theory is science.
It's a very ridiculous belief.
When it's not scientific.
I think you guys might be dismissing the mechanism that's been pretty
we're
adequately described.
Dismissing it because it's ridiculous. It's stupid.
By a lot of different people.
Mechanism or method, like it's a mechanism or method that we should believe in because you believe in it. Therefore, we should believe in it. Like if I force Christianity down your throat, would that be any different than what you're doing right now?
I don't feel like I'm forcing it down your throat. I was trying to have a discussion about it, discussing the reasons for your belief, and maybe to see if you guys have better reasons than I was given growing up. But I wasn't trying to force anything down your throat. If you feel that way, I can leave. It's no problem.
Well, let me just say something. We all agreed to click the link for this hangout. We all agreed to come together to have a structured discussion on the topic. So, since we've chosen to butt heads, I guess it might be okay.
I would refer to a Friends episode. If you ever watch Friends, he owned Ross.
It's way before my time.
Over evolution, if you remember that. Ross kept trying to push evolution down Phoebe's throat, and Phoebe fought back so hard. You know what she said? Is there a tiny little minuscule possibility that you could be wrong about evolution? And you know what? Ross caved in and said, yes, there is. So,
well, I mean, that's sort of interesting.
Thing.
I mean,
I just want
his admission of his limitations doesn't seem to be an admission of wrongness in the theory, right? I mean, understanding
if evolution is scientific, John, we need the mechanism and we need the observable example.
Is
science is what you can know. Science is what you can know. You have to explain and tell us what you know happened.
Okay, so John says sexual reproduction.
Evidence, right? So I mean, that's the mechanism.
Let's take that. Let's take that and go with it. So, tell me how sexual reproduction produces the genetic information, the code for things that don't already exist in the anatomy of an organism. Because we know that it is the information in the genome of an organism that creates its features. If the information isn't there, it's never going to appear in the organism. That's what we know. Okay? So how does sexual reproduction produce this new information that codes for for anatomical change? What's the scientific evidence of that?
Sexual gametes contain DNA that isn't contained in the parent of the creature. So all sexual gametes are different from each other and contain different DNA and genetic markers from each other, and they contain different DNA than the parent itself.
Great.
So when we're talking about sexual reproduction, we're talking about a process that is already variated from the very moment that the sexual gamete is inside of the individual. Mm-hmm. Now, when they come together, the process by which these two are combined is going to be variated, and there will be mutations that occur in that combination. Then within the first 4 days of that sexual zygote being developed, there's going to be mutations in the development of its properties and genetic material. So we're talking about mutations that operate all along the process of sexual reproduction that allow variation within breeding populations that can be selected for or against depending on the appropriateness of the property to the environment.
Okay, great, John. Now that's all well and good. Everything you said is scientifically correct. Now, what is the evidence that this is a mechanism for anatomical change?
Well, we've only got to look at it as a mechanism for genetic change, right?
Right. Nobody argues genetics doesn't change.
You can only change what's already there. That's the only thing you can do is change what's already there. You can't come up with something that's not there.
But John, listen to me a second.
But the wonderful thing is that DNA creates
genetic change,
possibility for all sorts of anatomical changes. We've already said at the beginning here that DNA is an amazing code, contains the ability to have multiple changes to it and change anatomically. So we know that genetic change is equivalent to anatomical
that's total speculation. That's total speculation.
John, so John, there it is. You see, you pointed to your belief.
It would be only speculation. John, if that's all the evidence I had.
John, you see, there it is.
If you have to nitpick about this single issue, then we can do that. But I feel like there's more information, right? I'm simply giving you the mechanism, but the indication that it is true is further than that. That is the mechanism.
John, what you described is a mechanism, but is it a mechanism for anatomical change? That's what you
That's
believe.
The theory.
It's a mechanism for change. Let me finish, John. Hold on. We're going to get to the meat and bones of what you're believing here. Okay, you're believing that reproduction and genetic variation are able to produce the anatomical change, right? That's your belief. Remember, I said evolution is philosophy, not science. Now you've got to show us that it's observed to take place, that there is known by science, that science has demonstrated, and by observation or testing, that,
I agree. That's a separate issue.
The reproduction and genetic variation within a kind of creature is able to produce anatomical change. That's what you need to do. To move this idea from philosophy into science.
But why are you asking more than you originally asked me? Right? You asked me for the mechanism. Now, if we're talking about the indication,
and I said an observable example.
Yeah, okay, so we're going to talk about the indication that that mechanism is, in fact, the way that we're changing, right? So that mechanism would be true if we could see that there was a nested hierarchy in between all of the animal species, right? So we look around and we see a tree of life in which we see anatomical features developing along a lifespan of animals, right?
They're buried
So the
by the
nested
global flood.
hierarchy that we observe in nature is, in fact, the indication that our genetics are, in fact, descended from each other.
Well, that's the idea.
From
But now let me
each-
give
from
you
each,
some
in fact,
information
step of it,
about
right?
that, John. Let me give you some information about that. Okay, so you believe that there is this the evidence that supports the idea that genetic variation will produce the countless anatomical and continuous anatomical changes that results in different anatomies. You believe that's supported by the fact that we see genetic similarity between various kinds of living things. Right, and so that apparently that's exactly what it's done. I get that. That's more philosophy. Let me give you some information about that idea, about this idea of phylogenetics. Let me give you a couple of quotations by some prominent scientists on this matter. This is by Dr. Carl Woese, 1998. He said this, and I quote him, "No consistent organismal phylogeny has emerged from the many individual protein phylogenies so far produced." And he's also said, "Phylogenetic incongruencies can be seen everywhere in the universal tree, from its root to the major branchings within and among the various taxa to make up the primary groupings themselves." Carl Woese is a world-renowned microbiologist credited with having discovered the third domain of life, archaea. He is a world-renowned professor. If anybody knows microbiology, he is the king of it. All right, he's one of them. So he says no congruent phylogeny has ever emerged from studying proteins between various creatures. This would be true if evolution were true. That's for me, not him. Now, he says also incongruencies are everywhere through the quote-unquote Darwinian tree of life. Incongruencies. In other words, they'll find the genetics of a genome of a creature, supposedly the ancestor, or that came from another creature, or that they're both supposedly closely related to a common ancestor in relatively recent evolutionary history, and they find differences in their genomes that say, hey, wait a minute, that doesn't add up. These two are supposed to be closely related to each other, to a common ancestor that lived just 1 million years ago, and it doesn't add up. And so he's telling you, what he's telling you is this idea of phylogeny is in fact bogus. It's a great idea, but it's not working out scientifically. And also, here's another. This is from Understanding Phylogenetic Incongruencies, Lessons from Phylostomid Bats. This is published by NCBI. This is by NIH.gov, PubMed Science Journal. And it states, and I quote, "Incongruence between phylogenies derived from morphological versus molecular analysis and between trees based on different subsets of molecular sequences has become pervasive as data sets have expanded rapidly in both characters and species." In other words, the more we study this idea of phylogeny, the more problems we produce instead of more consistency. In other words, this continued study of phylogeny is killing the idea of phylogenetics and the Darwinian tree of life, not supporting it. It should be verifying it. It's doing the opposite. It's breaking it down and showing that the phylogenies are not congruent, that there's differences that cannot be accounted for by evolution. And this idea that all living things are genetically related on some Darwinian tree of life is not supported by genetics. And let me give you one example. Okay, there in human beings and chimpanzees and lots of other creatures, virtually all kinds of life are what's called recombination hot swap locations. If you, I'll use this example I've used many times. If you were in a helicopter flying 3,000 feet above a city, a town, and you noticed that lots of cars kept going and coming from specific locations in this town, you'd wonder, what's going on? These are hot spots in town where everybody seems to be coming and going. What's going on there? And you get the helicopter to drop down from, say, 5,000 feet down to 300 feet. You say, oh, I get it. These are convenience stores. This is where people are going to get their cigarettes, their beer, their gasoline, their cokes, and they're buying, whatever. That's what it is. They're hot spots where all this activity seems to be going on. There are spots like that in the genomes of every living thing. They're called recombination hot swap locations. And in human beings, there are hundreds and hundreds of them, and also in chimpanzees. Now, if human beings, and follow me along, human beings and chimpanzees supposedly had a common ancestor anywhere from 1.4 to 4 million years ago, depending on what evolutionist scientist you talk to, right? That's relatively recent, supposedly, according to evolution. They had a common ancestor. Now, when they studied the hot swap locations of human beings and chimpanzees, they discovered none of their hot swap locations line up. If you compare their genomes, they're all completely random different. They're all just completely different. Now, evolution apparently, firstly, didn't preserve any of that, the locations of them. Why didn't it? Secondly, if evolution was, if they were both related to a common ancestor, the hot swap locations in the common ancestor would have been whatever they were, right? And for them to have be completely different in the human and the chimpanzee, so a couple of million years later, means that they all had to be rearranged. They had to have moved in the human being and the chimpanzee, so that the end result was humans and chimps came from a common ancestor, and their hot swap locations got all washed around and changed up so that they don't match anymore, right, between the human and the chimp. Now, there's only one problem with this, and it's a grave problem. The only known mechanism for the relocation of a hot swap location is translocation. That means it has to be moved, literally, picked up like a baggage and walked somewhere else in the DNA and plucked back down. And the only mechanism known for that is chromosomal rearrangements. That's called translocations. The problem here is this. Chromosomal translocations produce terribly destructive effects in organisms. They result in things like Tay-Sachs disease, Down syndrome, cancer, all kinds of list of things, about a couple of dozen diseases that are all severe, very severe. Now, you can't claim evolution produced viable species that were selected for by natural selection over a couple of million years by endless, continuous chromosomal translocations that get fixed in the genome of the organism. That organism would have gone extinct before it was even 10,000 years old, much less 2.5 million years old. See, so this is what this is, John, is empirical evidence that man and chimpanzee cannot be related genetically. That it is impossible, because it is not possible for the genome of the human and the chimpanzee to have completely different hot swap locations relocated by location of chromosomes so that they get rearranged over millions of years and still produce creatures that are fit for survival. It would have made them both go extinct in a puff of smoke. Poof, you're out.
I don't know. I think that sounds a lot like philosophy, Evan. I mean,
no, that's
we're
science.
Talking about. No, I mean that's the thing is we have. I mean, these hotspot locations, you're right about the translocation and all that stuff, but I mean, we're not talking about instantaneous or even single generation changes.
It doesn't matter. So many of them would have to have taken place. When one of them, well, look, when one translocation can cause cancer or a completely defunct immune system or Down syndrome,
then it gets chosen. It gets selected.
What kind of damage is there going to be in getting 10 of them, much less 300?
To the genetic material, nothing, because they're going to be eliminated before they're reproduced.
But
if they have a negative effect, they will be selected against.
But they weren't eliminated, John. That's the thing.
That's right. That's right, because not every mutation gets selected against, and that is the reason why we can have these big jumps, why we can have apparent surges in genetic changes, because not every change to that genetic material gets selected against.
No,
some of it doesn't actually get phenotypically expressed, and then we can have big changes to what we think are very set genetic materials.
No, John, it's like this. Natural selection did not remove these translocations because they are there. That's the problem. They're there because the hot swap locations, the hundreds of hot swap locations in the human genome, do not match up with the hundreds of hot swap locations in the chimp. They got fixed. If evolution were true, these were all preserved. These hot swap translocations were preserved. And organisms which cannot be viable if they have a repeated accruing translocations in their chromosomal rearrangements like that. It's simply impossible. When one of them is, because see, that's the evidence. Natural selection did not deselect them, else that would have preserved the lining up of their locations would have been preserved. See, if natural selection was removing these translocations, it would have preserved the arrangement of the hot swap locations as they were. But it didn't do that. Apparently, they've all been reshuffled into different locations by these translocations if evolution were true. And we know that can't be true because that would have made the organism go extinct rapidly. And if you'd like information on why translocations are so degradatory, I've got lots of information about that for you. I'll provide some right now if you like. I'm looking at in my files here.
You just told me to fuck off in the side chat. So
Who said that?
John.
Yeah, well, I mean, listen, if you're just going to be a pedantic dick the whole time, Neo, I mean, we can get over a little bit of we talk or a little bit of royal we talk.
You're not getting a little emotional. You got a little emotional, bro.
It's just that I've actually got to go right now, and I really appreciate your guys' time, and I was trying to get in there to do it, but I think that your attitude here, Neo, actually isn't helpful.
I'm typing in the side chat, and you're getting.
Yeah, I know you're typing in the side chat. We. That's really helpful for the conversation. But I think that in the long run, your focus on singular issues like this, like language, you telling me to calm down isn't actually helping. I don't know if you know.
Saying "fuck off" doesn't really help me either, does it?
And repeating it out loud doesn't actually help it either. I mean, that's actually escalating things.
All right, see ya.
No, please. I mean, I would really love to have a rational conversation about this. I don't feel like I'm being rude or trying to be aggressive in any sense here. So
John, you're doing.
I really appreciate. Yeah, I just feel like that was just being a little pedantic and sort of distracting away from what we're talking about here. And I really do appreciate you taking the time, Evan. Like you've actually been really nice to me, and I appreciate you guys like at least being like running through these things with me when I have the questions. So thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Okay. Well, John, thanks for coming in. I just want to tell you before you go. I'm looking at right now in my favorites. I'm about 18 links to science papers that describe the terribly destructive effects of translocation.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, and cool.
I'd like to have provided this to you sometime.
Yeah, that sounds great, man. I'm following you on G+, so if you look me up, you can find me there, and I'd be happy to take a look at them. I'm always interested in that sort of thing.
Okay. Well, thanks for coming in and having a talk.
No, thank you guys so much, and please, I hope I didn't ruin everything. I wasn't trying to be an asshole.
No. Look, when people have these discussions, it seems like it inevitably turns into the creationist talking over the evolutionist, and the evolutionist talking over the creationist. Only thing is, we just need to try to limit it as much as possible. We've all done a little of it here, but I think we did pretty good. We all talked over each other a little bit. We still got stuff done. So I think we did pretty good for people who've got such diametrically opposed views about things.
Right, exactly. And I appreciate you hosting this, Jungle Jargon. Thanks so much. I hope your computer's doing okay. I noticed you
it was nice. It was nice you could come in. Nice meeting you and stuff.
Thanks, guys. I really appreciate it. So enjoy the rest of your hangout and have yourself a good night.
Okay, take care.
Peace, guys.
Okay, so we lost Eamon. I guess where did he live? But see, the thing is, they keep talking about changes. You can only change from what's already there. You can't put information that's not there in there.
That's right. You need a continuous input of new genetic information for evolution to be true. No such thing is known to exist.
Right, and it's like he believes that he's the one that's right.
They're not going to push me around. Man. Yeah. Don't push me around. Don't act like I'm a little pushover Christian that you can start cursing at, because I'll do the same thing to you, and I know the Bible tells me not to, but I'm not a perfect Christian. I'm sorry. Sometimes people push me to the limit, and they want me to come out. I did not ever say one curse word or anything bad.
So why did he say that in the chat? I don't get it.
Because he got frustrated. That's why. You know what I'm saying? That's he got frustrated. Really, it's a philosophical. I said, would you want me to say the same thing to you? And he said no. See what I'm saying? He don't like philosophy. That's the problem.
Well, the whole evolution theory is philosophy. I was hoping to get him to understand that, but it's difficult to do with evolutionists because they cling to the idea, and it's got to be true regardless, you know. And so they have a hard time accepting that their philosophical idea is not actually science.
Well, you know why they come after you, Neff? They come after you because they think that you claim that creation is a fact the same way that they claim that evolution is a fact.
Yeah, well, I do.
It's the same.
Yeah, I do.
That's the problem. That's why they attack you and Jungle Jargon.
Yeah.
6,000 years.
Yeah.
I don't believe in the 6,000-year-old theory. I'm sorry. I'm kind of like a. I don't think any man has the technology today to tell us how old it is. I mean,
I think the Bible gives us
I know the Bible. I know.
6,200 to. I think the Bible tells us 62 to 6,700 years.
No, I
you can
agree.
slip 100 century in here, you know.
Yes, I agree with you. I'm not saying that. You know what I'm saying? The Bible does say something similar. You know what I'm saying? But to me, it's not that I don't believe in the Bible. It's just like, or interpretations of man of the Bible, or not you, or Neff, or, you know what I'm saying? Is it okay for somebody to just be open-minded and say, you know what I'm saying, I don't know. I mean, I know that Christ is my Savior, but none of my knowledge saves me. My knowledge does not save me.
The point is that we can only talk about what we have evidence for. We can only talk about what.
And I don't deny that for anybody. I'm not saying you guys are wrong or anybody's wrong or anybody, you know.
We can't talk about 8,000 years because we got no evidence of 8,000 years.
Do you think that they give creationists millions and billions of dollars of equipment that they give evolutionists?
Well, creationists are excluded from the.
See what I'm saying?
The scientific method.
Well, creationist scientists have conducted scientific studies into the age of the Earth. One of them was called RATE, R.A.T.E, and a number of highly qualified scientists studied the age of rocks and had them sent off to the same labs secular camps do. And they got all kinds of problems. And it's really good, interesting talks they give on YouTube. You can watch a series of videos by it. Anyway, it's getting late for me. I'm going to.
Hey, I want to apologize. Excuse my language, guys. Please excuse my language. I can't be pushed. So
thanks for the contribution. Yeah. And Neil, we're all learning. You know, we're all trying.
Okay, guys. You have a blessed weekend, and catch you guys next time. Thanks, John.
No problem.
Have a good one, guys.
Okay.
Don't keep getting less of me, please.
Yeah.
I definitely fight for Christ every day that I can, and man, sometimes people call me these names, and I'm like, who are you? All of a sudden, you're trying to have a decent conversation, but you're hiding an agenda underneath it. You're not here to debate.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
you're not here to debate. You're here to make fun of Christians, is what you're doing.
Right. Yeah, that's true. But I can see that too. But we have to hit every one of his points, and for him to see.
I wish I could be the perfect Christian, but don't put me like that.
He's got to see where he's wrong, because it won't do any good if he doesn't see it.
Well, I said goodbye, John. I left because I had undignified myself. I said I'm going to undignify myself by saying what I'm going to say, and I'm sorry I did. But God forgive me for what I'm going to say. And that's what I said before I said it. And I said, don't push me around like I'm nothing. you don't know Christians, don't start cursing at Christians because they will say the same thing back to you. You go on the street, you think you're a big man over the microphone, go up to somebody on the street who's a Christian and say that, and I'll bet you they're going to say something like I said back to you. I'm not going to guarantee. Most Christians will lose it on you. And they'll tell you, who the F are you? You know what I'm saying? They'll come back, you know what I'm saying? Don't push people. You think we're pushovers because we're Christian? You better back off.
Yeah, but we don't have to curse. I mean, we don't have to use bad language to react. So we can still react, forcefully. I mean, and
that's why I'm admitting
angrily, without.
Right now, while we're still alive, I'm sorry for what
because I get very angry sometimes, but I usually have control, of what I say and do.
I usually do too, but I mean, some people, like that guy has been pushing me for a long time.
Yeah, I guess.
I've known him for a long time, and yeah.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, you're right about him not having the intention to have a discussion. He's just trying to push his.
Like J.D. Kane. J.D. Kane is the same.
Push his views, yeah.
J.D. Kane does the same thing. He acts like he's going to have, or Dragnet also has the same tactic. They act like they're going to talk to you, and then they start trashing you halfway through.
And they don't have anything to back up what they believe.
Skylar Fiction does the same thing. All these people, you guys,
yeah,
that's who they learn it from. They learn how to get to you, like emotionally. They're like, oh yeah, so what have you been through? Do you think they really care what you're saying?
No, they.
You know what I'm saying?
They come to cause trouble is basically what they do.
Yeah.
But
you gotta understand psychiatry and the psychology. But yeah, I'm gonna let you go.
But we're trying to help them see where they're wrong.
You know what I'm saying? Of course, I am supposed to do that, but that's what I'm doing by saying what I'm saying is that the reason that people hurt you is because they've been usually hurt themselves in the same way that they're trying to hurt you.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's psychiatry, psychology. I've learned, I mean, I don't know everything, but it's true for me because I've been through all this stuff. I've realized that the people that were trying to help me, they were trying to hurt me, but they were trying to hurt me because they were trying to help me. It's a big circle, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it is a circle of violence or whatever you call it.
Yeah.
They learn, they act out the way they were treated. And
I wouldn't be who I am today if that wouldn't have happened. I'm not happy about what happened, but I'm grateful that I am who I am today through it. That's what I'm saying. Because of God.
Yep.
Because God wouldn't want me any other way. He knows what I've been through, and He knows why I believe in Him. And maybe what I've been through is the reason He put me through it, or maybe I put myself through it, or whatever it is that people believe. Because I don't have any set belief on what God has done for me. I just know He has done something for me, and that's the main point. It's not how He did it; it's that He has done it.
Right.
I think a lot of people lose that point. They're like, "Oh, well, how did God save you?" It's like that's not the.
Yeah, it's a visible change. It's a visible. Yeah.
You get what I'm saying? I mean, a lot of Calvinists or maniacs, all this.
Plus the fact that we're telling the truth and they're not.
Right.
Which is a big difference.
I can tell you from my heart how God saved me. If you don't believe me, do you think I care?
Yeah. It's like there's a lot of people that used to be criminals and stuff, and their heart was changed, their life was changed.
Oh yeah, they come back at us and say, "Oh, most people from jail come out Christians and they stab people and they're murderers." And I'm like, that's because they didn't go into jail being Christians.
Yeah.
I mean,
right.
Jail converts people. Sorry, that's the truth. I don't know if you've ever seen the statistics. You're saying that murderers go to jail and then come out Christian. What's the problem?
Yeah. Yeah, their life has changed. I mean,
Well, no, they
it's
still
visible.
murder, they still do stuff, they still rob, they still steal. Like, yeah,
I
come on, man. I mean,
I've seen.
everybody does stuff. I mean, everybody has their own sin. To God,
I've seen. I saw a documentary on David Berkowitz and the family that was affected by what he did, and even members of the family said that he's not the same person as what he was
yeah,
when he committed the crimes.
yeah,
There's a visible change.
yeah. I see that. Who was it? What's it? Jeffrey Dahmer?
Yeah, I heard something.
He changed. He knew what he did was wrong.
Yeah, I
He,
mean,
he said, I didn't know what I was doing was wrong. Some people say, oh, that's just a cop out, blah, blah,
yeah,
blah, all this other stuff.
yeah,
And
they're
I'm
trying
like,
to get off. Yeah,
and I'm like, that's not going to save him. But he already knew that they were going to kill him when he said, hey, come on. He said he was, come on, man. You can't do that. He knew he was going to die. He said, I deserve to die. I mean, come on.
but if it's that much of an effect that the Bible has on a person that they're not the same person, then that's something to take note of. I mean,
And
and
I
people
know the
just
atheists will try to tear apart everything I say.
they just totally ignore. They just totally
And I'll be like,
ignore.
listen, that's what he was saying to me. Anything that I say on here, that's what, in my honest opinion, I am HO. You know what I'm saying? That's what I believe. It's not that I'm not saying for everybody. Everybody's going to try to say, oh, no, that's not what he said, blah, blah, blah. See, it's like I almost got to make a disclaimer every time you talk, right? You can't say the word we, because if you say the word we, who are you talking about?
Right.
Are you
Well,
talking about them or us?
he's trying to say scientist like he's a scientist that knows what the facts are, but he's not listening very well. He's not listening very well to what the problems are with evolution.
You know, we as scientists, as if all scientists believe in evolution. See, when he says the word we, he's encompassing and using an umbrella blanket term.
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
Nobody gets these philosophical points when anybody's talking. They just want to get into it with the person. If you can stop them from what they're saying, then there is no argument.
Right.
All you got to do is halt them in their tracks.
Well, they
Philosophy, it doesn't take science, it just takes common sense.
yeah, they need to see what the mistakes they're making, and one of them is thinking that we know that evolution happened, and we don't. When we don't know any
You're
part.
not one of we, you're not in the circle. That's what they'll say.
Yeah, I mean, I know for a fact that it didn't happen, but trying to explain it to them is kind of hard when they don't listen, pay attention. And see, that's the thing. They think they know so much. They think they understand it. And what do you mean? We don't understand evolution. We understand very well what the claim is.
Well, that was the next step I was going to go to. It's called an absolute truth claim.
I mean, evolution.
Absolutely, it truly is a fact. I mean, come on. Who can say that about anything? Absolutely, it is truly a fact that I'm here on this planet. That's not even an absolute fact. What you could say is, I know that I'm on this planet for a fact from what I know of. But see,
Yeah,
you gotta
from
break
what I
down
understand,
the
yeah.
thing. You know, like I know from what I know of that I appear to be and assume that I am on this planet You know, come on, you gotta break it down, man.
But when dealing with theology and doctrine, there are things we can know, and we have to know. If we're going to
Oh,
be
of
able
course,
to.
and they would bring that up also. I'm just saying you got to open your mind to the possibility of evolution not being true. See, that's what they can't do.
Yeah.
That's the problem. I'm trying to break it down even further. I'm sorry I went too far, but you know what I'm saying? It's like they can't even admit that they may not even exist on this planet. Jesus said that Nicodemus, remember?
Yeah.
You know not where the wind comes from or where it goes, and I know I'm going scriptural, but come on, I mean that really speaks for just about anything that you can bring up. You could replace wind from where it comes from and wind where it goes with any two words. You don't know where this comes from or where it goes. You don't know where blank blank. You know what I'm saying?
Right, and that's the same thing I try to explain with time.
All right.
You don't know where it came from, and you don't know. You can't say this was such and such amount of time.
All right.
You don't even know if there was any time.
How do you know? You don't know. Do you have a time machine? Is there something you're not telling me?
Yeah, there's no evidence from the time where they say there was billions of years ago. There's no evidence of that from
You
that.
look at a bunch of bones and buildings and things and say, this is the age that I assume that it is. See, that's the difference. That I assume that this is the age that it is through the dating methods, through technology that we have today. This is not an absolute truth claim. This is an approximate or maybe an assumption of a date through the technology that we have today. So when they say millions or billions of years, they're using technology to assume that date. I think when they say we know for a fact that the technology works, then the fact part kind of falls away. You know what I'm saying?
You mean with the radio dating?
Every kind of whatever dating method or whatever they're talking about, that's just one example. But we assume anybody who's not a believer, right? They assume that God doesn't exist. They assume that the dinosaurs and humans didn't coexist. They assume that. I mean, I could go down the list. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, they're not paying attention is what's happening.
They're assuming these things. They trust and believe in men through science.
They're not paying attention to what's going on. Yeah, they're not paying attention to what's going on around.
Right.
They're in their belief.
Yeah. I think you've heard this kind of same thing before from either Ken Ham or Kent Hovind, or we're assuming, or Kent Hovind's son Eric Hovind, when he fought Thunderfoot, he accused Thunderfoot of assuming things that he doesn't absolutely know. He's not making an absolute truth claim. An absolute truth claim is saying, and nobody can make these claims. This is called logical fallacy, and it goes down is that you cannot say that I absolutely know for a fact blank.
Well, I know that I was made to exist.
Well, I mean, you could say that I believe or I have faith in. See,
well, there's nothing to refute the fact that I was made to exist.
Well, you know what I'm saying, though. I mean, that's your opinion, and nobody can take that away from you. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but it's a pretty good absolute. I mean, pretty close to absolute as far as I can tell.
Everybody in the world is going to disagree with you.
Yeah, so
I mean,
I was made to exist. It's observed that I was made to exist, so I absolutely have a maker.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying, though. I mean, like, it gets to the philosophical point of you don't absolutely know anything. That's the thing I was trying to get.
Yeah, but that's getting so philosophical, wrapped up that you can't even see what the reality is, or
No,
tied down.
see, if I would expound on it even more, there are things that you can know through reason, but science cannot prove.
Yeah, and as far as what we experience in life, yeah,
You know,
that's science.
logic and reason cannot be proven through science because it takes logic and reason to whatever circular reason to get to the logic and reason. I forgot what the whole argument was. But basically, you cannot use logic and reason to prove science because it takes logic and reason to use science in the first place or something like that. You see what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
that is reasonable to believe, but it cannot be proven through science. You see what I'm saying?
Well, it's I don't know. That's you're kind of limiting yourself as to what you can know.
Well, that's William Lane Craig's argument. That's not mine.
When
I mean, he has 5 things.
the problem is that if there's nothing you can know, there's nothing you can tell me.
No. He's saying we're reasonable to believe it. It's just not something that science can prove. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of reasonable stuff that people just ignore, and that's creation is the main thing.
Right.
It's reasonable. It's very reasonable, but people just ignore it. That's why I say they're not paying attention to what's
Actually,
going on.
I think it takes more intellect to believe in creation than it does evolution. I think it takes less intellect to believe in evolution than it does to believe in creation.
Right, I think so too, because
It takes way more of an understanding to believe how everything is derivative of each other according to the DNA code. Because if you start looking at code in that way instead of the way that evolutionists look at it, then it would probably create more progress faster. I think that the cloning projects or whatever they're trying to do would be successful if they would look at it in a creationist style view, but they're limited to believing that through evolution that they can do this, and it hasn't worked.
right, somehow it's missing. They're missing something in the cloning process.
And I believe that's the key, is that they're not looking at the code in the correct way. That they're looking at it through the telescope or the lens of an evolutionist. If they would look at the code through the lens of a creationist, and unfortunately, that's why they weed the creationists out of the scientific community, I believe, is that they don't want them influencing how they do things. But what they do is, I believe, they probably steal the ideas from creationists who are working on something on how to do those kinds of things and kick them out or whatever, because there's hardly any creationist geneticists or people that do that kind of thing. But what I'm saying is, I think that they're stealing from God, like Frank Turek says.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
That's
They're
true.
basically like they're trying to do what God has already done, and they're trying to. If they would understand it the way that God has done it instead of trying to manipulate it, then it would probably be more successful, in my view. And here's the thing: God isn't going to allow that kind of thing. So I think all of their attempts are just going to be like John Lennox said. The more you do science, the more pockets of science you keep opening. You're never going to get to the end of science. There's never going to be something where we say we're done with science. You're going to just keep spreading science into something that is you're just going to keep diving into pockets and pockets of endless pockets of science, basically.
Yeah, I think it's funny that Steve McRae, as one example, he's thinks that gravitational waves prove that evidence of against the young Earth. I'm saying no, that's evidence for young Earth. I think it's funny that they'll just take. I mean, if you mention something, they'll just take it and say that's proof of the contrary.
You know,
Flat earthers do that too. You say.
I hate to say it, Steve is pretty intelligent, but I mean, we're all growing in the grace of God, aren't we? I mean, he definitely holds some opposite beliefs, but he's pretty smart, and I think if he's that smart, I mean, one day he's got to get it. I mean,
well, yeah, if he was that smart, then he would see what the problem is. And he's just not seeing it, or acting like he's not seeing it anyway.
Yeah, somebody put up a post earlier. I think it was St. Tommy. He said, "You can't convince somebody who acts like they're blind, or who pretends that they're blind. You can't."
Right, they're not.
That pretends they're blind or something. You know what I'm saying? Like, basically in Scripture it tells you, you know what I'm saying, don't walk off a cliff with a blind man leading you by his hand or something, you know.
They're not going to be convinced, right?
Yeah.
Because they're already pretending.
Yeah. Nobody knows. And that's what the Scripture said. Nobody knows. So, I mean, there's no single man on the planet that's going to be telling me that it's absolute fact. You know what I'm saying? It's just I may have a strong adherence to it, or have like some kind of philosophical belief about it, but I'm not going to like say that I absolutely believe in Johnny Calvin. I absolutely believe in St. Tommy. I absolutely believe in whatever it is. I'm not one of those people. I try to stay as non-denominational as possible. You know what I'm saying? I love churches, but a lot of churches where I live are usually influenced by the Masons.
Well, they're like structured churches or whatever.
Yeah. Like tithing churches that make you tithe.
Yeah. But it's amazing that they're out there teaching their belief in whatever it is. I have a coworker who's I guess a Mason or something like that. Yeah, Mason. And we try to tell him. Everybody tries to tell him, that that's not a good thing. You shouldn't be in that. He says, no, it's good.
Well, the only evidence that I have against Masons personally is that they use a false story of Solomon's temple builder. I forgot his name. It starts with a Z or something. And you can ask them, it's a ritual that they use in the Scottish rites. I don't know if they use it in every single Freemason building, but basically they have a guy who is supposed to be Solomon's temple builder who has a Masonic secret that nobody else knows.
Right.
So, and that is kind of the covenant. It's basically like a college frat house for big rich guys.
Yeah. There's no secret teachings in the Bible.
Right.
Everything is open for anybody to find out, learn.
I think having a brotherhood is good, but that's a little.
Yeah, there's there's problems with secret teachings. They're usually secret because they can't be exposed to the light.
Well, I know a lot of Masons here and there, and my wife's father, he stopped being a Mason and became a Christian. So he knew it was a bad organization. They serve liquor right at the bar inside of these like moose clubs, and you know what I'm talking about? All those
Yeah.
Mason houses that they have like the animals on top of them, and it's really weird. They're all like rich guys that get together.
Yeah.
Cadillacs and whatever, and they have drinks and they play bingo or whatever they do. I don't know. Who knows what's going on in the background? Anyway, a lot of money going on.
Yeah.
Because I used to live in Florida. I mean, the bingo games. Everybody there. If I could look at the cars and just count up how much people were there, it's probably like. I mean, it's got to be like in the 500 million, something like that. I mean, more than that. I was like, wow, some of these people had new cars that don't even exist until next year.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, these are the top of the top. These are the people that have had luxurious lives off. I don't get it. I'm like, wow, and her dad said, well, I realized that it was a bad kind of corporation, is the way he would say it. He called it a corporation.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Yeah, it's kind of strange. I don't know.
Well, you have to put money into the Masonic Temple.
Yeah, I might have to. Hold on a second.
I gotta go anyway.
All right, I'll see you then. All right, bye.